Christmas morning at my parents' house in suburban Denver. I watch my younger sister Grace unwrap keys to a brand new Honda Civic while I stare at a plastic piggy bank with a single crumpled dollar bill inside. Mom beams, explaining this is their contribution to my future home down payment. The room falls silent as I process the blatant favoritism. Grace gets $20,000 of transportation while I receive childhood mockery disguised as financial planning. I excuse myself upstairs, pack my belongings, and walk out the front door forever. The living room had been transformed into a winter wonderland with twinkling lights, casting warm shadows across carefully wrapped presents beneath our 7-foot Douglas fir. I had arrived early that morning carrying thoughtfully chosen gifts for everyone, my heart full of anticipation for our family tradition. At 25 years old, I still felt that childhood excitement bubbling up as we gathered around the tree in our matching red pajamas that Mom insisted we wear every Christmas. Grace, 2 years younger but somehow always treated as the family princess, sat cross-legged on the Persian rug that had belonged to our grandmother. Her dark hair fell in perfect waves around her shoulders, and she wore that knowing smile she always got when she suspected something special was coming her way. Dad played his usual role as gift distributor, reading name tags with theatrical flair, while Mom documented everything with her vintage Polaroid camera. The gift exchange began with smaller packages. Grace received designer jewelry, expensive makeup palettes, and a leather handbag that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. I opened practical items like socks, a generic scarf, and a cookbook for budget meals. Everyone laughed and chatted, but I noticed the distinct difference in enthusiasm when my gifts were opened versus the genuine excitement Grace's presence generated. Then Dad retrieved 2 final packages from behind the tree. One was a small envelope, thin and light. The other was a substantial gift bag with tissue paper spilling from the top. My stomach twisted with a familiar sensation of disappointment as I realized which gift would be mine. Grace tore into her bag, first pulling out a set of car keys attached to a Honda keychain. She screamed with delight, jumping up to hug both parents while they grinned with pride at their successful surprise. Through the front window, we could all see the gleaming silver Honda Civic parked in our driveway, complete with a giant red bow across the windshield. My hands trembled slightly as I opened my envelope. Inside was a child's plastic piggy bank, the kind you might give to a 6-year-old learning about saving pennies. Pink and white stripes decorated its sides, and a coin slot on top was just wide enough for quarters. Nestled inside was a single dollar bill, wrinkled and worn as if it had been pulled from someone's pocket at the last minute. The room fell silent. Even Grace stopped her celebration to stare at my gift. Mom cleared her throat and launched into an explanation about how this was their contribution to my future home, down payment, how saving money was important, how this would help me learn financial responsibility. Her words sounded rehearsed, as if she had practiced this speech in front of a mirror. Dad nodded along, mentioning how Grace needed reliable transportation for her marketing job across town, while I could easily walk or take the bus from my apartment to my retail position at the mall. He spoke about practical decisions and budget considerations, but his eyes never quite met mine during the entire explanation. I sat there holding that ridiculous piggy bank, processing the mathematics of their gift-giving. Grace had just received a reliable vehicle worth $20,000 insurance coverage registration fees and the promise of maintenance support. I had received a plastic toy and $1 presented as if this was somehow equivalent or appropriate for a college graduate working full-time to support herself. The humiliation burned through my chest like acid. This wasn't about financial responsibility or teaching moments. This was about favoritism so blatant that even our relatives would gossip about it for years. This was about my parents making a public statement regarding which daughter they valued, which one deserved investment, which one had potential worth nurturing. Grace tried to break the tension by suggesting we take the new car for a drive around the neighborhood, inviting me to join them for the inaugural trip. Her offer felt like salt being rubbed into an open wound, a chance for me to participate in celebrating my own humiliation. I politely declined, stating I had other plans for the afternoon. The conversation moved on to car features, insurance details, and Grace's excitement about her improved commute. I became invisible in that moment, forgotten while they discussed practical matters related to their substantial investment in my sister's future. Nobody asked about my plans, my struggles with rent, or my dreams of eventually owning something reliable myself. Excusing myself to use the restroom, I climbed the stairs to my childhood bedroom, which had been converted into Mom's craft room years ago. My old twin bed remained in the corner, covered with fabric scraps and sewing patterns. I sat on the edge of that bed, staring at the piggy bank in my hands, and made a decision that would change everything. While driving away, I received a text from my mother demanding I continue paying the family's utility bills, since I had been covering them for 2 years to help out. The family had been living off my contributions while treating me like a burden. My phone buzzed against the passenger seat as I waited at a red light 3 blocks from my parents' house. The text message notification showed Mom's name, and I assumed she was reaching out to apologize for the morning's gift exchange disaster, or perhaps to invite me back for Christmas dinner. My naive optimism lasted exactly as long as it took to read her actual message. "Hi, honey, hope you're not too upset about this morning. Just a reminder that the January electric bill will be due soon, and we'll need you to call the utility company about the payment like always. Also, the gas bill came yesterday, and it's higher than usual because of the cold snap. Thanks for taking care of everything as usual. Love you." I stared at my phone screen in disbelief, reading the message 3 times before its full meaning sank in. My mother had just humiliated me with a dollar bill gift, watched me walk out of their house in obvious distress, and then immediately texted to remind me about my financial obligations to the family that had just made it clear I wasn't valued enough for a decent Christmas present. The light turned green, but I was too stunned to notice until the car behind me honked impatiently. I pulled into a gas station parking lot, my hands shaking as I processed the casual cruelty of that text message. The timing was almost impressive in its heartlessness. Mom had managed to reduce me to a utility payment service within minutes of my dramatic exit from their family celebration. For 2 years, I had been covering the electric, gas, and water bills for my parents' 4-bedroom house. The arrangement started when Dad had a brief unemployment period, and I offered to help with utilities to keep their services from being disconnected. Mom had tearfully explained how embarrassing it would be if their neighbors discovered their financial struggles, and I had stepped in like the dutiful daughter I had been raised to be. But Dad had been back at work for 18 months now, earning more than ever at his construction management position. Grace had been employed full-time at a marketing firm for over a year, living rent-free in her childhood bedroom while saving money for her own place. Yet somehow my temporary assistance with utilities had become a permanent expectation, never discussed or appreciated, just assumed as part of my role in the family dynamic. Sitting in that gas station parking lot surrounded by families loading up on road trip snacks and holiday travelers filling their tanks, I calculated the mathematics of my family's financial arrangement. I had been paying approximately $300 per month in utility bills for a house I didn't live in, while struggling to cover rent, groceries, and student loan payments on my retail salary of $11 per hour. Meanwhile, Grace had been living completely expense-free in that same house, keeping every penny of her marketing salary while I subsidized her comfortable lifestyle. She drove Dad's old pickup truck without contributing to gas or insurance, ate Mom's home-cooked meals without buying groceries, and enjoyed all the utilities I was paying for while saving money for whatever future plans she was making. The text message represented more than just a bill reminder. It was a perfect encapsulation of how my family viewed my role in their lives. I was the financial safety net, the reliable source of assistance, the daughter who could be counted on to sacrifice her own stability for their comfort. But I wasn't the daughter who deserved investment encouragement or basic respect. I scrolled through my message history with Mom looking for previous conversations about these utility payments. What I found was a pattern of increasingly casual demands disguised as polite requests. The language had evolved from grateful appreciation during Dad's unemployment to entitled assumption as their financial situation improved. "Can you handle the electric bill this month too?" had become, "The electric bill is due on the 15th. Expressions of gratitude had disappeared, entirely replaced by logistical coordination and deadline reminders. I had become an unpaid accounts payable department for people who apparently considered my financial contribution less valuable than a child's piggy bank. My phone buzzed again with a follow-up message from Mom. Also, Grace mentioned the cable bill went up because she upgraded to premium channels for her shows. Can you call them about that too, thanks, sweetie? The casual mention of Grace upgrading to premium cable services while I paid the bills felt like a physical slap. My sister was enhancing her entertainment options at my expense, literally adding costs to bills I was covering while she saved her entire salary for her own future. The entitlement was breathtaking in its casual cruelty. I thought about Grace sitting in that living room posing with car keys to a vehicle our parents had purchased for her, while premium cable channels I was funding played in the background. She was living a subsidized lifestyle that allowed her to present herself as financially successful and independent, while the actual source of her comfort remained invisible and unacknowledged. Another text arrived, this one from Dad. Chandra, your mom said you seemed upset earlier. Hope you understand we're just trying to teach financial responsibility. Grace needs reliable transportation for her career advancement. Maybe next year we can help with your situation too, depending on how things go. By the way, the water heater has been making noise lately. Can you call a repair service and handle that? Thanks, kiddo. Dad's message was a masterpiece of manipulation disguised as paternal wisdom. He managed to minimize my justified anger, rationalize their favoritism, make vague promises for future consideration, and assign me another household expense, all while maintaining a tone of casual authority that made my objections seem childish and ungrateful. The phrase, depending on how things go, particularly stung. What things? How well I continued to subsidize their household expenses. How gracefully I accepted being treated as a second-class family member. How quietly I absorbed their humiliation without causing uncomfortable scenes that might disrupt their comfortable narrative. I realized that my family had been operating under a completely different understanding of our relationships than I had. While I thought I was temporarily helping during a difficult period and slowly building toward more equal adult relationships, they had been establishing a permanent hierarchy where my financial contributions were expected and my emotional needs were irrelevant. The water heater repair request was particularly galling. Not only was I expected to pay for the service call and any necessary repairs, but I was also responsible for coordinating the appointment, dealing with repair technicians, and managing the logistics of maintaining their household comfort. I had become their property management service, handling the inconvenient aspects of homeownership while they enjoyed the benefits. Grace had never been asked to handle utility payments, coordinate repairs, or sacrifice her financial stability for family harmony. She had been protected, invested in, and celebrated, while I had been utilized, taken for granted, and dismissed. The Christmas morning gift exchange had simply made their long-standing attitudes visible in a way that could no longer be ignored or rationalized. Sitting in my car with these text messages glowing on my phone screen, I felt something shift inside my chest. The hurt and humiliation from the morning began transforming into something sharper and more empowering. Clarity. For the first time in my adult life, I could see my family's dynamics with perfect transparency, stripped of the comforting illusions I had been maintaining to avoid confronting painful truths. They had been using me, not supporting me, not helping me grow, not preparing me for success. Using me as a reliable source of financial assistance while investing their actual resources in the daughter they believed had better potential for reflecting positively on their parenting success. I was the insurance policy. Grace was the investment. I turned off my phone and sat in the silence of my car, watching holiday shoppers hurry past with their bags full of carefully chosen gifts for people they actually cared about. The contrast with my own Christmas morning couldn't have been more stark. These strangers were investing time, thought, and money in making their loved ones feel valued and appreciated, while my own family was texting me about utility bills before I had even processed the morning's humiliation. The decision crystallized in that moment. I would not be calling about electric bills, gas bills, water bills, or cable bills. I would not be coordinating water heater repairs or managing any other aspects of their household maintenance. I would not be subsidizing Grace's comfortable lifestyle while she posed with expensive gifts I could never afford. I was done being their unpaid, unappreciated financial support system. If they wanted utility services, they could pay for them with the money they had saved by not buying me a decent Christmas present. If Grace needed premium cable channels, she could pay for them with the salary she had been keeping while I covered her household expenses. Starting my car, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. The lightness of setting down a burden I had been carrying for so long that I had forgotten how heavy it was. My family would learn to manage their own household expenses, just like the millions of other American families who somehow survived without a designated daughter to handle their financial responsibilities. At my apartment, I found forgotten paperwork revealing my parents had used my Social Security number to open utility accounts years ago, making me legally responsible for all household debts without my knowledge. Back at my studio apartment in a converted Victorian house near downtown Denver, I dumped my duffel bag on the futon that served as both couch and bed. The space felt cramped after spending the morning in my parents' spacious suburban home, but at least here, I could think without feeling judged or manipulated. The afternoon sun streamed through my single window, illuminating dust particles dancing in the air and highlighting the stack of unopened mail I had been avoiding on my kitchen counter. I made coffee in my ancient drip machine using the last of my good grounds that I had been saving for a special occasion. Christmas morning seemed like as good a reason as any to break out the premium blend, especially after the morning I had endured. While the coffee brewed, I decided to tackle that pile of mail, figuring I might as well face whatever bills or notices were waiting for me. Most of the envelopes contained the usual suspects: my student loan statement showing a balance that never seemed to decrease, despite regular payments, a credit card bill for the card I used for emergencies and paid off religiously each month, my rent statement for January already higher than I could comfortably afford, standard adult responsibilities that I handled without help or complaint. But buried beneath the routine correspondence, I found an envelope that made my stomach drop. It was addressed to me, but the return address showed Colorado Springs Utilities, a company I had never done business with since I lived in Denver. My parents lived in Colorado Springs, about an hour south of my apartment. Why would their utility company be sending me mail? Inside was a statement for an electric account opened 3 years ago in my name, showing a current balance of $847 in past due charges. The account address was my parents' house. The Social Security number on the account was mine. But I had never authorized this account, never signed any paperwork, never even spoken to Colorado Springs Utilities about anything. My hands started shaking as I ripped through the rest of the mail pile with new urgency. I found a second statement from the gas company, also in my name, for my parents' address. Past due balance $623, a third statement from the water department. Past due balance $412, all accounts opened in my name, all for my parents' house, all showing months of missed payments and accumulating late fees. I grabbed my laptop and pulled up my credit report, something I should have been monitoring more carefully, but had avoided because I was afraid of what I might find. The loading screen seemed to take forever, but when the information finally appeared, I felt like I was going to be sick. My credit score had plummeted to 543, down from the 720 it had been when I graduated college. The report showed multiple utility accounts in delinquency, all tied to my Social Security number, but none at my actual address. There were also 2 credit card accounts I had never opened, both showing maxed out balances and missed payments. But the most shocking discovery was a home equity line of credit for $68,000 opened 18 months ago using my identity and credit history. The address was my parents' house. The monthly payment was over $400, and it was currently 3 months behind. This wasn't just identity theft, it was systematic financial fraud that had been going on for years. I called the credit card companies first, my voice shaking as I explained that these accounts had been opened without my authorization. The customer service representatives walked me through fraud dispute procedures, explaining that I would need to file police reports and provide documentation proving identity theft. They assured me the accounts could be closed and the debts removed from my credit report, but the process would take months and require extensive paperwork. The home equity line of credit was more complicated. The bank representative explained that because the loan was secured by real estate and involved substantial amounts resolving identity theft claims, would require legal proceedings and possibly federal investigation. The amount of fraud involved moved this beyond simple credit card disputes into serious criminal territory. As I made call after call, the scope of my family's betrayal became clearer. They had been using my identity to finance their lifestyle for years, probably since shortly after I graduated college and established my own credit history. Every payment I had been making on their utility bills had actually been payments on accounts illegally opened in my name. I hadn't been helping family. I had been unknowingly paying debts created through identity theft. My phone rang, interrupting my investigation. Mom's name appeared on the screen and I answered without thinking, my mind still reeling from what I was discovering. "Hi, sweetie. I was thinking about this morning and wanted to make sure you weren't too upset. You know we love you just as much as Grace, right? We just have different ways of showing it. Your gift was more thoughtful, really, because it's about building good financial habits for the future." Her voice was warm and concerned, the same tone she used when I was a child and needed comfort after a scraped knee or hurt feelings. But now that tone felt manipulative, designed to make me doubt my own perceptions and accept whatever explanation she offered for their behavior. "Mom, I need to ask you something, and I want you to tell me the truth. Did you and Dad open utility accounts in my name?" The pause on the other end of the line lasted several seconds too long. When Mom finally responded, her voice had lost its warmth and taken on a defensive edge. "Well, honey, that was during a really difficult time when your father was out of work. We needed to keep the utilities on, and our credit wasn't good enough to open new accounts after some missed payments. You were just starting your career and had excellent credit, so we thought we could borrow your identity temporarily until we got back on our feet. We were going to tell you eventually and get everything transferred back to our names." The casual way she described identity theft as borrowing my identity was breathtaking. She spoke as if taking my social security number and opening accounts without my permission was a reasonable family favor, like borrowing a cup of sugar or asking to use my car for an afternoon. "Mom, that's identity theft. It's a federal crime. And according to my credit report, some of these accounts have been open for 3 years. Dad has been working for 18 months. When exactly were you planning to tell me?" "Don't be so dramatic, Chandra. Family members help each other out during tough times. You benefited from living in our house for 18 years, so helping with some bills now that you're independent is just part of being responsible for the family that raised you. We weren't trying to hurt you. We were trying to survive a difficult period." Her attempt to reframe identity theft as family obligation was masterful in its audacity. According to Mom's logic, my parents providing food and shelter during my childhood created a debt that justified criminal activity against my credit and financial future. The fact that I had been unknowingly paying these fraudulent bills for months was presented as evidence of my willing participation, rather than proof of their deception. What about the home equity line of credit, Mom? That's almost $70,000 borrowed against your house using my social security number. How is that helping with utility bills during unemployment? Another long pause. When she spoke again, her tone had shifted from defensive to angry. "How do you know about that? Have you been checking up on us that money went toward Grace's college loans and some improvements to the house that benefited all of us? The bathroom renovation, the new roof, the updated kitchen. You enjoyed those improvements when you visited, so you benefited from that spending too." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. They had borrowed nearly $70,000 using my identity to pay for Grace's student loans and household improvements while I was still making payments on my own college debt. Grace's education had been funded through fraud against my credit while I was struggling with legitimate loans that would take years to repay. Mom, I can't believe what I'm hearing. You stole my identity to pay off Grace's student loans while I'm still paying mine. You used my credit to renovate your house while I'm living in a studio apartment because I can't afford anything bigger. We did what we had to do to keep this family afloat during a crisis. You're being selfish and dramatic about something that helped all of us get through a difficult time. This is exactly why we gave you that piggy bank this morning. You need to learn about financial responsibility and family obligation instead of thinking only about yourself. The conversation was surreal in its complete inversion of reality. My mother was lecturing me about financial responsibility while confessing to years of identity theft. She was accusing me of selfishness while describing how they had used my credit to benefit Grace and themselves. The piggy bank gift was being presented as a lesson in responsibility from people who had systematically destroyed my credit rating through criminal activity. I'm hanging up now, Mom, and I won't be paying any more utility bills since apparently they're actually my bills anyway, opened illegally in my name. Chandra Marie, don't you dare hang up on me. If you stop helping with those bills, our utilities will be shut off right before New Year's. Is that really what you want, to leave your family without heat and electricity during the coldest part of winter, after everything we've done for you? The guilt manipulation was expertly delivered, designed to make me feel responsible for consequences that were actually the result of their own criminal choices. But I could see through the technique, now recognizing it as another tool in their arsenal of emotional control. You should have thought about winter heating bills before you destroyed my credit with identity theft. Figure it out like every other family in America figures it out, with your own money and your own credit. I hung up and immediately turned off my phone, my hands still shaking from the conversation. Sitting on my futon with credit reports and fraudulent bills spread around me like evidence at a crime scene, I tried to process the full scope of what I had discovered. My family hadn't just been taking advantage of my generosity. They had been systematically committing federal crimes against my financial identity for years, using my credit to fund Grace's education and their lifestyle improvements while I struggled to build my own independent life. The morning's humiliation with the piggy bank wasn't just favoritism. It was insult added to criminal injury. Grace's marketing career had been built on a foundation of education funded through fraud against my identity. My parents' comfortable middle-class lifestyle had been maintained through identity theft that destroyed my credit rating. The beautiful house I had grown up in with its renovated kitchen and updated bathrooms had been improved using money borrowed against my financial future. I had been paying bills for utility accounts that were illegally opened in my name, essentially making payments on debts created through identity theft, while my family enjoyed the benefits. Every dollar I had contributed to their household expenses had been a payment toward fraud rather than a voluntary family contribution. The mathematical reality was staggering. If the pattern held across all their financial dealings, they might have stolen hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of credit in my name over the past few years. My entire adult financial life had been built on a foundation undermined by my own family's criminal activity. But perhaps most devastating was the realization that this morning's gift exchange had been calculated cruelty from people who knew exactly how much damage they had already done to my financial future. They had given Grace a car while knowing they had stolen my ability to qualify for decent financing. They had lectured me about financial responsibility while actively destroying my credit through ongoing fraud. As the afternoon sun faded outside my apartment window, I sat surrounded by evidence of the most profound betrayal I could have imagined. My family hadn't just failed to support my dreams and goals, they had actively undermined my financial stability through systematic criminal activity while maintaining a facade of caring parents concerned about my development. The piggy bank with its single-dollar bill sat on my kitchen counter where I had dropped it when I arrived home. Looking at it now, I understood its true meaning. It wasn't a thoughtless gift or even simple favoritism. It was a deliberate insult from people who knew they had already stolen my financial future, a mocking reminder of how little I mattered to them compared to the sister whose success they had purchased with crimes against my identity. At my retail job, my manager Derek revealed he had been receiving calls from debt collectors looking for me, and my employment might be terminated due to financial liability concerns. Monday morning arrived gray and cold, typical for late December in Denver. I had spent the weekend researching identity theft procedures and making lists of all the fraudulent accounts I needed to dispute, but I still had to show up for my scheduled shift at Mountain View Mall. Working retail during the post-Christmas sales rush was normally exhausting enough without carrying the additional weight of discovering my family's systematic financial crimes. I arrived at Trendy Threads, the mid-tier clothing store, where I had worked for the past year and a half, 15 minutes early as usual. The store occupied a prominent corner location in the mall's main corridor with floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased our latest winter clearance displays. During the holiday season, we stayed busy with customers hunting for bargains, returning unwanted gifts, and spending gift cards on discounted merchandise. Derek Walsh had been the store manager for 3 years, and we had developed a comfortable working relationship based on mutual respect and reliability. At 32, he was young enough to understand the challenges of retail work, but experienced enough to handle the corporate pressures that came with managing a profitable location. I had always appreciated his straightforward communication style and fair treatment of all employees. But when I walked through the employee entrance that Monday morning, Derek's usual friendly greeting was replaced by a concerned expression and a request to see me in his office before I clocked in. His tone suggested this wasn't a casual conversation about scheduling or sales targets. The office was a cramped space behind the stockroom, barely large enough for Derek's desk, 2 filing cabinets, and a second chair for employee meetings. Motivational posters about teamwork and customer service, shared wall space with sales charts, and corporate policy reminders. Derek closed the door and gestured for me to sit down, his demeanor more serious than I had ever seen it. "Chandra, I need to talk to you about something that's been happening over the past couple of weeks. I've been getting phone calls here at the store from debt collection agencies looking for you. They're calling during business hours, and some of these calls have happened while you were working the floor with customers nearby." My stomach dropped as I realized the scope of how my family's identity theft was affecting my life beyond just my credit score. Debt collectors were now pursuing me at work, creating professional complications that could threaten my employment and reputation among colleagues. I've tried to handle these calls discreetly, but last Friday, one of the collectors was particularly aggressive and called 3 times during our busiest afternoon rush. Sarah overheard part of the conversation when she answered the phone, and now there are questions from the staff about your financial situation. Sarah was a 20-year-old college student who worked part-time and had a tendency toward gossip. If she had overhead details about debt collection calls, the entire staff would know by the end of the week. My private financial problems were becoming public workplace drama, exactly the kind of situation that could make my position untenable. "Derek, I can explain this situation. I've been the victim of identity theft by family members, and these debts aren't actually mine. I'm in the process of disputing everything and filing the necessary reports to clear my name." Derek's expression softened slightly, but his concern remained visible. He pulled out a manila folder from his desk drawer and opened it to reveal several pages of handwritten notes. "I've been documenting these calls because corporate policy requires managers to report any situations that might affect employee reliability or store security. The collectors have mentioned specific amounts and account numbers, and some of these debts are substantial. One caller mentioned an amount over $60,000. The home equity line of credit. Debt collectors were already pursuing the largest of the fraudulent accounts, and their aggressive tactics were threatening to destroy my professional reputation along with my credit rating. I could imagine how these conversations sounded to Derek and my coworkers, like I was someone who had taken out massive loans and simply refused to pay them back. I know how this must look, but I had no knowledge of any of these accounts until this weekend. My parents have been using my social security number to open credit lines without my permission. I have proof of the identity theft, and I'm working with the credit bureaus to resolve everything." Derek leaned back in his chair, clearly wrestling with how to handle a situation that was unprecedented in his management experience. Mountain View Mall employed hundreds of people, but financial scandals involving debt collectors calling the workplace were unusual enough to attract attention from corporate headquarters. "Chandra, I want to believe you and your work performance has always been excellent. But I received a call this morning from regional management asking about these debt collection calls. Apparently one of the collectors contacted mall security when they couldn't reach you through our store phone, and security reported it to mall management as a potential issue. The situation was escalating beyond my workplace into the broader mall community. Security had been involved, which meant other managers and store employees throughout the complex might be aware of my supposed financial problems. My reputation in the entire shopping center could be compromised by my family's criminal activity. What did you tell regional management?" "I explained that you're a reliable employee with no previous issues and that I would investigate the situation and report back. But they made it clear that employees with ongoing debt collection issues can be terminated if those issues start affecting store operations or customer experience." Derek's tone remained sympathetic, but I could hear the underlying message. My job was in jeopardy because of financial crimes I hadn't committed, and corporate policy gave management the authority to fire employees whose personal problems created workplace disruptions. "How much time do I have to resolve this?" "They want a full report by the end of next week. If these calls continue or if more collectors start contacting the store, I'll have to recommend termination to protect the store's professional environment." "I'm sorry, Chandra. I know this isn't fair, but I have to follow corporate guidelines." The injustice was overwhelming. My family had stolen my identity, destroyed my credit, and now their crimes were threatening my employment. I was facing potential job loss because of debts I hadn't incurred, while Grace enjoyed her new car, and my parents lived comfortably in their renovated house. "Derek, I understand your position, but I need you to know that I'm taking this seriously. I'm filing police reports and working with attorneys to resolve the identity theft. These debts are not my responsibility, and I'll have documentation proving that within a few days. I hope you can resolve everything quickly. You're one of our best employees, and I'd hate to lose you over something that isn't your fault. But I also have to be realistic about corporate expectations and store policies." As I left Derek's office and prepared for my shift on the sales floor, I realized how thoroughly my family's crimes were destroying every aspect of my life. My credit was ruined, my savings were depleted from paying fraudulent bills, my family relationships were destroyed, and now my employment was threatened. The ripple effects of their identity theft were expanding into areas I hadn't anticipated. During my lunch break, I called Amy Rodriguez, a paralegal I had met through a community college class we had both taken the previous year. Amy specialized in financial fraud cases at a downtown law firm, and she had mentioned during class discussions that identity theft by family members was more common than most people realized. "Chandra, I'm so sorry you're going through this, but what you're describing is definitely prosecutable identity theft. The fact that it involves family members doesn't make it less serious legally, and the amounts you're talking about move this into federal crime territory." Amy's professional tone was reassuring after the morning's stressful conversation with Derek. I needed someone who understood the legal implications and could help me navigate the process of clearing my name before I lost my job. "How long does it usually take to resolve these kinds of cases?" "That depends on how much evidence you have and how cooperative the financial institutions are. For employment purposes, you can often get temporary documentation within a few days that proves you've filed identity theft claims. Most employers will accept that as evidence of good faith while the investigations are ongoing." Amy agreed to meet with me that evening to review my documentation and help me understand my legal options. She warned me that prosecuting family members for identity theft often caused permanent relationship damage, but she emphasized that the crimes I was describing were serious enough to warrant federal investigation, regardless of family dynamics. Returning to work after lunch, I noticed that my coworkers were treating me differently. Conversation stopped when I approached, and several people avoided eye contact while I was restocking merchandise. Sarah must have shared whatever she had overheard about the debt collection calls, creating an atmosphere of awkward speculation about my financial problems. The afternoon shift dragged as I tried to focus on helping customers while knowing that my professional reputation was being damaged by my family's criminal activity. Every phone call to the store made me tense, wondering if it was another debt collector who would create more problems for Derek to explain to corporate management. Near closing time, Derek called me back to his office for a brief follow-up conversation. His expression was more sympathetic than it had been that morning, suggesting he had spent the day thinking about the situation. "Chandra, I did some research about identity theft procedures, and I understand this is more complicated than typical debt problems. If you can provide documentation that you've filed formal identity theft claims within the next few days, I can probably buy you some additional time with regional management. I'm meeting with a paralegal tonight to start the formal process. I should have police reports and credit bureau documentation by Wednesday. That would help significantly. I want to make this work because you're a valuable employee, but I also have to protect the store's interests and follow corporate policies." As I drove home that evening, I reflected on how my family's identity theft was creating a cascade of problems that extended far beyond my personal credit rating. My professional reputation, my relationships with coworkers, my future employment prospects, and my immediate job security were all being threatened by crimes I hadn't committed. The meeting with Amy would hopefully provide a path forward, but I was beginning to understand that resolving identity theft was a complex legal process that could take months or years to complete. In the meantime, my life was being systematically destroyed by the ongoing consequences of my family's criminal choices. Grace was probably at home in my parents' house enjoying her premium cable channels and planning weekend trips in her new Honda Civic, completely insulated from the devastation their crimes were causing in my life. She had benefited from identity theft without consequences while I was facing job loss and professional humiliation. The inequality of our situations was staggering. My sister's comfortable lifestyle had been purchased with crimes against my financial future, while I was struggling to maintain basic employment and housing stability. My parents' gift exchange that Christmas morning had been a deliberate celebration of this imbalance, a public acknowledgement that Grace deserved investment while I deserved mockery. But I was no longer the naive daughter who accepted whatever treatment my family offered. The identity theft discovery had stripped away my illusions about their character and motivations. I was ready to fight back with every legal tool available, regardless of how that affected our family relationships. Grace arrived at my apartment with fake tears, revealing she orchestrated the Christmas humiliation because she was jealous of our parents' pride in my college graduation and needed to level the playing field. Tuesday evening brought an unexpected knock at my apartment door, interrupting my preparation for the meeting with Amy Rodriguez. I wasn't expecting anyone, and my paranoia about debt collectors had me reluctant to answer unexpected visitors. But when I peered through the peephole, I saw Grace standing in the hallway with red-rimmed eyes and tissue in her hand, looking genuinely distressed. My first instinct was concern despite everything that had happened over the past few days. Despite the identity theft discovery and Christmas morning humiliation, Grace was still my little sister, and seeing her upset triggered protective feelings I couldn't completely suppress. I opened the door cautiously, unsure what kind of conversation was about to unfold. "Chandra, I'm so glad you're home. I've been feeling terrible about Christmas morning, and I needed to talk to you about what happened. Can I come in? I think I owe you a huge apology." Her voice was shaky with emotion, and tears were already starting to flow down her cheeks. This was the Grace I remembered from childhood, vulnerable and seeking comfort from her big sister, when the world felt overwhelming. Despite my anger about recent events, I stepped aside to let her into my small apartment. Grace looked around my studio space with what seemed like genuine surprise, as if she was seeing my living situation clearly for the first time. The contrast between my cramped apartment and our parents' spacious house was stark, and I could see her taking inventory of my modest furniture, tiny kitchen, and single window. "I had no idea you were living like this, Chandra. This place is so small and you're sharing a bathroom with other tenants. Why didn't you tell us you needed help with housing?" The question felt loaded with implications that my living situation was somehow my own fault, rather than the result of financial constraints created partly by their identity theft. But her tone seemed genuinely concerned rather than judgmental, so I decided to give her the benefit of the doubt. "Grace, there's a lot you don't know about my situation. I've been struggling financially partly because I've been paying bills for accounts that were opened in my name without my permission. Did you know about the identity theft ET-UD-10E? Her expression shifted from sympathy to confusion and then to something that looked like guilt mixed with fear. She sat down on my futon without being invited, clutching her tissue and avoiding eye contact. "I think we need to talk about a lot of things, but first I owe you an explanation about Christmas morning. What happened with the gifts wasn't random or thoughtless. I specifically asked Mom and Dad to do something that would embarrass you in front of the family." The admission hit me like a physical blow. I had assumed the piggy bank gift was simple favoritism or poor judgment, but Grace was confessing to deliberately orchestrating my humiliation. The cruelty had been calculated and intentional. "Why would you do that to me?" Grace's tears intensified, but now they seemed less like genuine remorse and more like self-pity. She launched into an explanation that revealed thought processes I couldn't have imagined. "Ever since you graduated from college, Mom and Dad have been treating you like you're so much more accomplished and mature than me. They constantly talk about how proud they are of your degree, how responsible you are with money, how impressed they are that you're living independently. I got sick of being compared to perfect Chandra all the time." The revelation was stunning in its complete inversion of reality. While I had been feeling like the overlooked daughter who received minimal attention and investment, Grace had apparently been experiencing our parents' treatment as favoritism toward me. Her perception of family dynamics was completely opposite to my own experience. "Grace, they just gave you a $20,000 car for Christmas while I got a dollar bill and a plastic piggy bank. How is that evidence of them favoring me?" But that's exactly what I mean. You always make everything about money and material things. Mom and Dad value your character and your education and your independence. The car was just practical necessity because I need reliable transportation for work. Your gift was supposed to teach you that material things don't matter as much as personal growth. Her ability to reframe deliberate humiliation as character development was breathtaking. According to Grace's logic, receiving an expensive car was somehow less valuable than being mocked with a child's toy, because the mockery came with a life lesson attached. "Grace, you asked them to embarrass me on Christmas morning because you were jealous that they respected my college graduation. I asked them to do something that would remind you that you're not better than me just because you have a diploma. You've always acted like you're more mature and responsible, and I wanted to show you that you still have things to learn about life and family relationships." The conversation was revealing layers of resentment and manipulation I had never suspected. Grace had been orchestrating family dynamics to undermine my position for months, possibly years. The Christmas humiliation was just the most visible example of a broader campaign to level the playing field between us. "What else did you ask them to do to remind me that I'm not better than you?" Grace's expression shifted again, this time to something that looked almost proud of her strategic thinking. She seemed pleased to have an opportunity to explain her clever maneuvering. "I suggested that you should be responsible for more household expenses since you're older and more established in your career. I pointed out that I'm still building my professional reputation while you've had more time to get financially stable. It seemed fair that you should contribute more to family expenses." The pieces were clicking into place with horrifying clarity. Grace hadn't just been passively benefiting from my financial contributions to the household, she'd been actively advocating for arrangements that forced me to subsidize her comfortable lifestyle. Did you know they were opening accounts in my name to pay for things like your student loans? Another pause this time, longer and more revealing. Grace's tears stopped flowing as she seemed to calculate how much to admit versus how much to deny. I knew they were having some financial difficulties when Dad was unemployed, and I knew you were helping with bills. But I didn't ask questions about the specific details because it wasn't my responsibility to manage their financial arrangements. The careful language suggested she knew more than she was admitting. Her phrasing was designed to acknowledge awareness while maintaining plausible deniability about the illegal aspects of their activities. Grace, they used my Social Security number to take out almost $70,000 in loans. Part of that money paid off your college debt, while I'm still making payments on my own student loans. Did you know your education was funded through identity theft? Her response revealed the full depth of her selfishness and moral flexibility. Instead of expressing shock or remorse about benefiting from criminal activity, she became defensive about her right to educational assistance. My student loans were a family investment in my future career potential. Mom and Dad recognized that my marketing degree would lead to higher earnings than your liberal arts education, so it made sense to prioritize paying off the loans that were limiting my career advancement. The casual way she discussed benefiting from identity theft while rationalizing it as sound financial planning was chilling. Grace had not only known about the crimes, but had participated in justifying them based on her supposed superior earning potential. So you knew they were stealing my identity to pay for your benefits, and you thought that was justified because you might earn more money than me in the future. I thought they were making smart decisions about family resources and investments. I didn't think about the technical details of how they managed their financial arrangements, because that wasn't my area of expertise. Grace's ability to frame identity theft as a family resource allocation decision was masterful in its moral evasiveness. She had managed to benefit from criminal activity while maintaining psychological distance from responsibility for that activity. The conversation continued for another hour, with Grace alternating between fake remorse and defensive justification for her role in orchestrating my humiliation and financial destruction. She seemed genuinely surprised that I was angry about the identity theft, as if she had expected me to accept criminal activity against my credit as a reasonable family obligation. When she finally left my apartment, Grace's parting comment revealed her true attitude about our entire relationship and the situation she had helped create. Chandra, I hope you can get past this anger and remember that family is more important than money or credit scores or who gets what gifts at Christmas. We're still sisters, and that should matter more than these temporary financial issues you're dealing with. Her characterization of systematic identity theft as temporary financial issues was the perfect encapsulation of her moral blindness and selfish prioritization. Grace had orchestrated years of criminal activity against my financial stability and then expected me to prioritize family harmony over seeking justice for those crimes. As I prepared for my meeting with Amy Rodriguez that evening, I realized that my family's betrayal was more comprehensive and calculating than I had initially understood. This wasn't just identity theft motivated by desperation during Dad's unemployment. It was a systematic campaign of financial destruction, orchestrated partly by Grace's jealousy and desire to undermine my position in the family hierarchy. Grace had successfully convinced our parents to humiliate me, publicly steal my identity, for her benefit and structure family financial arrangements to subsidize her comfortable lifestyle at my expense. She had then presented herself as the innocent beneficiary of family investment while portraying my anger as selfishness and ingratitude. The meeting with Amy would hopefully provide legal strategies for addressing the criminal aspects of their behavior, but I was beginning to understand that my family's betrayal extended far beyond simple identity theft into deliberate psychological and financial warfare designed to destroy my independence and self-respect. A paralegal friend, Amy, helped me discover that identity theft by family members was prosecutable, and my parents could face federal charges for the unauthorized accounts opened in my name. Amy Rodriguez's law office occupied the third floor of a converted warehouse building in downtown Denver's legal district. The exposed brick walls and industrial lighting created a modern professional atmosphere that immediately put me at ease. Amy had built her paralegal practice specializing in financial fraud cases, and her office reflected both competence and accessibility for clients dealing with complex legal situations. I arrived 20 minutes early carrying a manila folder stuffed with credit reports, fraudulent account statements, and documentation I had been gathering since discovering the identity theft. Amy greeted me with the same warm professionalism I remembered from our community college class, but her expression grew increasingly serious as I explained the scope of my family's criminal activity. Chandra, what you're describing isn't just simple identity theft. Based on the amounts involved and the systematic nature of these crimes, your parents could be facing federal charges under the Identity Theft and Assumption Deterrence Act. We're talking about potential prison sentences, not just fines or restitution. Amy's office walls were lined with legal reference books and framed certificates documenting her expertise in financial crime procedures. She had handled hundreds of identity theft cases over the past 5 years, but she explained that family-perpetrated fraud often involved psychological manipulation that made prosecution more complicated. Most victims of family identity theft struggle with reporting the crimes because they feel guilty about sending relatives to prison. But you need to understand that what your parents did is exactly the same as if strangers had stolen your identity. The fact that they're family members doesn't reduce the legal penalties they're facing. She walked me through the federal statutes that applied to my situation, explaining how each fraudulent account represented a separate criminal count. The home equity line of credit alone constituted bank fraud, identity theft, and wire fraud because electronic transfers were involved. The utility accounts added multiple counts of fraud and forgery related to falsified applications. Based on your documentation, I count at least 12 separate federal crimes. If prosecutors decide to pursue maximum penalties, your parents could each face 20 to 30 years in federal prison. The dollar amounts involved put this in the category of serious white-collar crime. The mathematical reality was staggering. My parents had committed enough federal crimes to potentially spend the rest of their lives in prison, all while maintaining the facade of respectable middle-class citizens concerned about their daughter's character development. The contrast between their public image and their criminal behavior was almost impossible to process. Amy spread my documentation across her conference table, organizing the evidence into categories that would be useful for law enforcement investigation. Credit reports, account statements forged, applications, and electronic communications created a comprehensive picture of systematic criminal activity spanning several years. The good news is that you have excellent documentation for prosecution. The bad news is that your family has been extremely thorough in their criminal activity. This isn't opportunistic fraud. This is organized financial crime that demonstrates planning and intent to cause substantial harm. She explained the process for filing formal complaints with federal law enforcement agencies. The FBI's Financial Crimes Division would coordinate with the Secret Service postal inspectors and banking regulators to investigate the full scope of the fraud network. Each fraudulent account would trigger separate investigations by different agencies. Chandra, I need to ask you a difficult question. Are you prepared to testify against your parents in federal criminal court? Because that's where this is heading if you decide to pursue prosecution. Your testimony will be essential for convictions, and defense attorneys will try to portray you as an ungrateful daughter seeking revenge for family disagreements. The question forced me to confront the reality of what seeking justice would mean for my family relationships. Testifying against my parents would permanently destroy any possibility of reconciliation or normal family dynamics. But allowing their crimes to go unpunished would enable them to continue destroying my financial future while facing no consequences for years of systematic fraud. Amy, they've destroyed my credit rating, threatened my employment, and stolen my financial future to fund Grace's education and their lifestyle improvements. Why should I protect them from the consequences of their own criminal choices? You shouldn't protect them, and you have every right to seek justice. I just want to make sure you understand the emotional and practical implications of federal prosecution. This will be a long, difficult process that will probably last 18 to 24 months and require extensive testimony about intimate family details. Amy opened a thick binder containing similar cases she had handled over the past few years. The stories were remarkably similar to mine family members using trusted access to personal information for systematic identity theft victims, discovering the crimes years after they began, and complex legal processes to restore credit and seek criminal prosecution. In my experience, family identity theft victims who pursue federal prosecution usually achieve better outcomes than those who try to handle things privately. Prosecutors take these cases seriously because family perpetrators often target multiple victims and represent ongoing threats to community financial security. She showed me documentation from a case involving parents who had stolen their adult children's identities to maintain a gambling addiction. Federal prosecution had resulted in prison sentences and full restitution, while the children had achieved complete credit restoration and financial recovery. The legal system had provided justice that private family negotiations could never have accomplished. What kind of timeline are we looking at for filing federal complaints? We should file within the next week while the evidence is fresh and before your parents have opportunities to destroy additional documentation. Federal investigators will want to secure bank records, computer files, and physical evidence before suspects become aware of the investigation. Amy explained that federal identity theft investigations often uncovered additional crimes that hadn't been discovered by victims. Computer forensics frequently revealed other fraudulent accounts, hidden assets, or evidence of crimes against additional victims. My parents' criminal activity might be more extensive than I currently understood. There's another issue we need to discuss. Based on the systematic nature of these crimes and the amounts involved, federal prosecutors will probably offer your parents plea bargains that include full restitution to victims. That could mean complete restoration of your credit, plus financial compensation for damages you've suffered. The possibility of financial recovery was encouraging, but Amy cautioned that restitution collection could take years and wasn't always successful. Many white-collar criminals manage to hide assets or declare bankruptcy to avoid paying court-ordered restitution to their victims. However, federal prosecution creates permanent criminal records that follow defendants for the rest of their lives. Your parents would be convicted felons with federal fraud convictions, which affects employment, housing, professional licensing, and numerous other aspects of life. The consequences extend far beyond prison sentences. As our meeting continued, Amy helped me understand the broader implications of my family's criminal activity. Grace's role as a beneficiary of identity theft could make her an accessory to federal crimes, especially if investigators determined she had knowledge of the fraudulent activity. Her confession about orchestrating my Christmas humiliation could be evidence of conspiracy to commit fraud. Did your sister provide any written communications about her involvement in the financial arrangements, text messages, emails, or social media posts that demonstrate her knowledge of the identity theft? I showed Amy my phone records from Grace's visit the previous evening, including text messages she had sent before arriving at my apartment. Several messages contained references to family financial arrangements and her awareness of my credit situation. The electronic evidence could establish her participation in conspiracy charges. Chandra, your sister, may have created evidence of criminal conspiracy without realizing it. If federal investigators find evidence that she knowingly benefited from identity theft while encouraging your parents to continue the fraudulent activity, she could face charges as an accessory or co-conspirator. The possibility that Grace could face federal charges alongside our parents was both terrifying and satisfying. She had orchestrated my humiliation and actively participated in justifying criminal activity for her benefit. If the legal system held her accountable for those choices, it would represent a level of justice I couldn't achieve through family confrontations. Amy spent the final portion of our meeting preparing documents for federal complaint filing. She would coordinate with FBI financial crimes, investigators provide comprehensive evidence packages to prosecutors, and help me navigate the complex legal procedures required for identity theft prosecution. I'll file the initial complaints tomorrow morning, and you should expect contact from federal investigators within a few days. They'll want detailed interviews about the fraudulent accounts, your family relationships, and any evidence you have about your parents' and sister's involvement in the crimes. As I prepared to leave Amy's office, she provided a folder containing information about victims' rights during federal prosecution, resources for credit restoration, and documentation I would need for protecting my employment during the investigation process. Chandra, you're doing the right thing by seeking justice for these crimes. Family identity theft often escalates over time, and your parents would probably continue stealing your identity if they face no consequences. Federal prosecution protects you and potentially other victims from ongoing criminal activity. Driving home through downtown Denver's evening traffic, I reflected on how dramatically my life had changed since Christmas morning. Less than a week ago, I had been a struggling retail worker, trying to help my family with utility bills. Now I was preparing to testify in federal criminal court against my parents and potentially my sister. But the legal meeting had provided clarity about my rights and options that I hadn't possessed before. Amy's expertise had transformed my confused anger into focused determination to seek justice through proper legal channels. I was no longer a victim of family manipulation. I was a federal crime victim with powerful legal remedies available. The evidence Amy had reviewed painted a clear picture of systematic criminal enterprise that extended far beyond simple financial desperation. My parents had committed enough federal crimes to face decades in prison, while Grace had potentially made herself an accessory to those crimes through her active participation and encouragement. Federal prosecution would provide justice restitution and protection from ongoing criminal activity that family conversations could never achieve. My parents would face consequences appropriate to the serious crimes they had committed, while I would receive legal assistance in rebuilding my financial future. As I pulled into my apartment building's parking lot, I realized I was no longer afraid of my family's manipulation or guilty about seeking justice for their crimes. The legal system would hold them accountable for their choices while providing me with tools to rebuild the financial stability they had systematically destroyed. Derek delivered final termination papers, unless I resolved my debt issues immediately, but accidentally revealed he had been dating Grace for months and knew about the family's financial schemes. Wednesday morning brought another dreaded call to Derek's office before my shift began. I had hoped that my meeting with Amy Rodriguez would buy me some time to resolve the debt collection issues, but Derek's expression suggested that corporate pressure was intensifying faster than legal procedures could address. The store was already bustling with post-holiday shoppers hunting for clearance deals and returning unwanted gifts. Our morning staff meeting had been brief but tense, with Derek clearly distracted by management concerns that extended beyond typical retail operations. When he asked me to stay behind after the other employees dispersed to their stations, I knew the conversation would be difficult. Chandra, I received another call from regional management this morning, and I'm afraid the situation is more urgent than we discussed yesterday. Corporate has issued a directive requiring immediate resolution of the debt collection issues, or I have to process your termination by Friday. Derek's tone was apologetic, but firm, reflecting the reality that he was caught between supporting a valued employee and following corporate policies designed to protect the company from potential liability. The accelerated timeline meant that legal procedures would take too long to save my employment. I understand your position, Derek, but I filed federal criminal complaints yesterday for identity theft. These debts aren't mine, and I have documentation proving that my family opened these accounts without my authorization. Can corporate accept federal crime victim documentation as evidence of good faith resolution efforts? Derek opened a thick folder containing what appeared to be extensive documentation about my employment situation. The size of the file suggested that my debt collection issues had generated significant corporate attention and administrative overhead. I've been documenting everything for corporate review, including your explanations about identity theft and the steps you're taking to resolve the situation. But yesterday I received information that changes how management views this entire situation. His hesitation suggested that whatever information he had received was more serious than routine debt collection concerns. Derek seemed genuinely uncomfortable about what he was preparing to tell me, as if he was reluctant to share something he had learned. What kind of information? Corporate security conducted a background investigation triggered by the debt collection calls and mall security reports. During that investigation, they discovered connections between you and other individuals involved in these financial issues. The corporate background investigation represented an escalation I hadn't anticipated. My family's criminal activity was now being scrutinized by professional investigators who might uncover additional information that could complicate my employment situation further. Derek pulled out a separate document that appeared to be some kind of investigation report. His expression was a mixture of sympathy and professional obligation as he prepared to deliver what was clearly unwelcome news. Chandra, during the background investigation, corporate discovered that I have a personal relationship with Grace Mitchell, who appears to be your sister and is connected to some of these financial accounts. They've determined that this relationship creates a conflict of interest that affects my ability to handle your employment situation objectively. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Derek had been dating Grace, which meant my sister had access to detailed information about my workplace problems, debt collection calls, and employment difficulties. Grace had been receiving insider information about how her family's criminal activity was affecting my professional life. How long have you been dating my sister? Derek's discomfort was obvious as he struggled to explain a relationship that had clearly been kept secret from me, despite our daily workplace interactions over the past several months. We met at a networking event for young professionals about 4 months ago. Grace mentioned she had a sister who worked retail, but she never told me where you worked until recently. When I realized the connection, I should have disclosed the relationship to management immediately. 4 months meant their relationship had begun before the identity theft discovery, before the Christmas morning humiliation, and before the debt collection calls started threatening my employment. Grace had been dating my manager while orchestrating family financial arrangements that would eventually jeopardize my job. Derek, did Grace ever discuss my financial situation or family issues during your relationship? Another pause, this one longer and more revealing. Derek's expression suggested he was realizing implications of conversations he had previously considered innocent relationship sharing. She mentioned that you were struggling with money management and had some family tensions around financial responsibility. She said your parents were concerned about your spending habits and debt levels. I assumed she was just sharing typical sibling concerns. The systematic nature of Grace's manipulation was becoming clear. She had been feeding Derek information designed to undermine my professional reputation months before the debt collection crisis began. Her networking had positioned her to influence my employment situation through personal relationships I hadn't known existed. What specifically did Grace tell you about my financial situation? Derek consulted his notes, clearly uncomfortable about revealing private conversations that now appeared to have been deliberate manipulation rather than casual relationship sharing. She mentioned that you had been borrowing money from your parents for several months and weren't making progress toward financial independence. She suggested that your family was enabling poor financial decisions by continuing to provide assistance. She said your parents were considering tough love approaches to encourage better money management. Grace's lies were masterful in their strategic precision. She had convinced Derek that I was financially irresponsible and dependent on family assistance, while the reality was that I had been unknowingly paying bills for accounts fraudulently opened in my name. Her misinformation campaign had prepared Derek to interpret debt collection calls as evidence of my poor character rather than criminal victimization. Derek, everything Grace told you about my financial situation was false. I haven't borrowed money from my parents. I've been paying their household bills for 2 years, while they were stealing my identity to fund Grace's student loans and their home improvements. Derek's expression shifted from discomfort to confusion as he processed information that contradicted everything Grace had told him about our family dynamics. The cognitive dissonance was visible as he struggled to reconcile his girlfriend's stories with documented evidence of criminal activity. Are you saying that Grace lied to me about your family's financial arrangements? I'm saying that Grace has been actively participating in a criminal conspiracy to steal my identity while feeding you false information designed to destroy my professional reputation. She knew that debt collectors would eventually start calling my workplace because she knew about the fraudulent accounts that were opened in my name. The implications of Grace's deception were overwhelming Derek as he realized that his girlfriend had been manipulating him to damage my employment prospects. His personal relationship had been weaponized against me without his knowledge or consent. Chandra, if what you're saying is accurate, then Grace has been deliberately misleading me about serious criminal activity, while I've been making employment decisions based on false information. Derek's professional integrity was clearly struggling with the revelation that his personal relationship had compromised his ability to manage my employment situation fairly. Corporate policies existed to prevent exactly this kind of conflict of interest. What does this mean for my employment situation? Corporate is requiring my recusal from all decisions related to your employment because of the undisclosed relationship conflict. Regional management will be assigning a temporary manager to review your case and make final decisions about termination or retention. The corporate response represented both good news and bad news. Derek's recusal might provide more objective evaluation of my situation, but it also meant that resolution would take longer and involve additional layers of bureaucracy that could delay final decisions. When will the temporary manager arrive to review my case? Regional is sending someone Friday morning for a complete review of the situation. They want to interview you, examine all the documentation about the debt collection calls, and review the identity theft evidence you mentioned. Depending on their findings, you could be reinstated, terminated, or placed on administrative leave, pending further investigation. Derek's revelation about dating Grace had created complications that extended beyond my immediate employment concerns. Corporate management would now need to investigate whether his previous decisions had been influenced by personal relationships, potentially exposing the company to liability for discriminatory employment practices. Derek, I need to know exactly what Grace told you about me and when she told you these things. My attorney will need that information for the federal criminal investigation. Derek spent the next 20 minutes reviewing his notes and recollecting conversations with Grace that he now realized had been manipulative rather than honest relationship sharing. The pattern was clear. Grace had been systematically undermining my professional reputation while positioning herself to benefit from my employment difficulties. She also mentioned that you might be forced to move back home with your parents if your financial situation didn't improve. She suggested that losing your job might actually be helpful because it would force you to accept family guidance about money management. Grace's long-term planning was chilling in its calculation. She had anticipated that her family's criminal activity would eventually threaten my employment, and she had positioned herself to ensure that Derek would interpret my workplace problems as evidence of personal failure rather than criminal victimization. Did Grace ever suggest specific actions you should take regarding my employment? She recommended that I not enable your poor financial decisions by being too accommodating about work scheduling or advancement opportunities. She said that tough love in the workplace would complement your family's efforts to teach you financial responsibility. The systematic coordination between Grace's workplace manipulation and family criminal activity demonstrated a level of conspiracy that transformed isolated identity theft into organized financial destruction. Grace had been actively sabotaging my professional opportunities while benefiting from crimes against my credit rating. As my conversation with Derek concluded, I realized that my sister's betrayal extended far beyond simple sibling rivalry into calculated professional sabotage coordinated with criminal family activity. She had weaponized romantic relationships to damage my employment prospects while maintaining the facade of concerned family member, trying to help her irresponsible sister. The temporary manager's review on Friday would determine whether corporate would accept identity theft documentation as justification for the workplace disruptions. But Grace's manipulation had created additional complications that might take weeks or months to fully resolve. Walking to my workstation for what might be my final shift at Mountain View Mall, I understood that seeking federal prosecution was the only way to address the full scope of my family's criminal conspiracy. Grace's workplace manipulation was evidence of coordinated criminal activity that extended beyond simple identity theft into systematic financial and professional destruction. My parents arrived at my apartment with forged power of attorney documents, claiming legal authority over my finances due to mental instability planning, to have me committed to gain complete control of my assets. Thursday evening brought an unexpected visit that would reveal the true depths of my family's criminal intentions. I was organizing documentation for Friday's meeting with the temporary manager when I heard familiar voices in the hallway outside my apartment, followed by authoritative knocking that seemed designed to convey official business rather than casual family visits. Through my peephole, I could see both parents standing in the corridor with Dad carrying a leather briefcase and Mom holding what appeared to be official documents. Their formal attire and serious expressions suggested this wasn't a social call or an attempt at reconciliation. Something about their demeanor immediately triggered alarm bells in my mind. "Chandra, we need to talk to you about some important legal matters. Please open the door so we can discuss this situation like adults." Dad's voice carried an authority I hadn't heard before, as if he was conducting business rather than talking to his daughter. Against my better judgment, I opened the door but kept the security chain attached, creating a small gap that allowed conversation while maintaining physical barriers. Their reaction to this precaution was immediate irritation, as if my caution was evidence of the unreasonable behavior they had come to address. "Sweetie, we understand you've been under a lot of stress lately, and we're here to help you through this difficult period. We've been consulting with professionals about the best way to support you during your current struggles." Mom's voice had the artificially calm tone often used with unstable individuals who needed careful management. Dad opened his briefcase and extracted a stack of official-looking documents, holding them up so I could see legal letterhead and formal formatting that suggested authentic legal paperwork. The documents appeared to include court forms, medical evaluations, and other materials typically associated with legal proceedings. "We've obtained emergency power of attorney documents that give us temporary authority to handle your financial affairs until you can get the professional help you clearly need. The stress of these debt collection issues and workplace problems has obviously affected your judgment and decision-making capabilities." The power of attorney claim was terrifying in its implications. If such documents were legitimate, my parents could potentially access my bank account, sign legal papers on my behalf, and make financial decisions that could further destroy my already compromised situation. "I don't consent to any power of attorney arrangements, and I haven't signed any documents authorizing you to make decisions about my finances," I replied through the gap in the door, my voice shaking slightly as I processed the magnitude of what they were attempting. Mom's expression shifted to what appeared to be genuine concern mixed with disappointment, as if my objection was evidence of the mental instability they had come to address. Her tone became more clinical and detached, resembling a healthcare professional discussing a difficult patient. "Honey, that's exactly why these documents were necessary. Dr. Peterson has evaluated the information we provided about your recent behavior, and he's determined that you're experiencing a mental health crisis that affects your ability to make rational decisions about your financial and personal welfare." Dr. Peterson was apparently the corrupt medical professional Amy Rodriguez had warned me about, someone who would provide favorable evaluations in exchange for personal benefits or debt forgiveness. The mention of his involvement confirmed that my parents were serious about pursuing legal guardianship through fraudulent means. What information did you provide to Dr. Peterson about my behavior? Dad consulted his documents before responding, reading from what appeared to be a prepared statement designed to support mental health claims that would justify emergency guardianship proceedings. We documented your recent erratic financial decisions, including your sudden refusal to help with family expenses after 2 years of reliable assistance. We explained your inappropriate emotional reactions to reasonable family gift exchanges and your paranoid accusations about identity theft when simple misunderstandings occurred regarding account management. The reframing of identity theft as simple misunderstandings regarding account management was breathtaking in its audacious denial of criminal activity. My parents were presenting systematic fraud as reasonable financial planning while portraying my justified anger as evidence of mental illness. We also provided documentation about your deteriorating workplace performance, including reports from your supervisor about debt collection calls and unprofessional behavior that threatens your employment stability. Mom added, clearly referring to information she had obtained through Grace's relationship with Derek. The coordination between Grace's workplace manipulation and my parents' guardianship scheme demonstrated a level of criminal conspiracy that extended far beyond identity theft into comprehensive life destruction. Every aspect of my independence was being systematically undermined through coordinated family criminal activity. Dr. Peterson has scheduled an emergency psychiatric evaluation for tomorrow morning, and we have court paperwork ready to file for temporary guardianship pending the results of that evaluation. Dad explained his tone, suggesting that my cooperation was expected rather than optional. The timeline was clearly designed to prevent me from seeking legal counsel or mounting effective opposition to their guardianship petition. Friday morning scheduling would coincide with my workplace meeting, creating additional complications that could support their claims about my inability to manage adult responsibilities. I'm not submitting to any psychiatric evaluation, and I don't consent to any guardianship proceedings. These documents are fraudulent, and you're attempting to commit additional federal crimes. Mom's reaction to my refusal was immediate escalation to what appeared to be prepared emotional manipulation designed to break down my resistance to their authority. Her voice took on the pleading tone she had used during my childhood when she needed compliance for family harmony. Chandra, we're trying to save you from destroying your life through poor decisions and mental health issues you're clearly not equipped to handle alone. If you don't accept our help voluntarily, we'll have to pursue involuntary commitment proceedings to protect you from yourself. The threat of involuntary psychiatric commitment was the most serious escalation yet in their campaign to gain control over my assets and eliminate my ability to pursue criminal prosecution for their identity theft. Successful commitment would give them legal authority over my finances while discrediting my testimony about their criminal activity. Through the door gap, I could see Dad reviewing additional documents that appeared to include commitment paperwork and contact information for psychiatric facilities. The level of preparation suggested they had been planning this intervention for days or weeks, possibly since the Christmas morning confrontation. We've already spoken with Pine Ridge Mental Health Facility about admission procedures, and they're prepared to accept you for evaluation and treatment as early as this weekend. Dad explained naming a private psychiatric hospital known for accepting patients with questionable commitment justifications. The mention of Pine Ridge confirmed that this was a coordinated scheme involving multiple corrupt professionals willing to provide fraudulent services in exchange for payment or debt forgiveness. My parents had assembled a network of unethical medical and legal professionals to support their criminal enterprise. Dr. Peterson has gambling debts with your father's construction company, and Pine Ridge receives substantial donations from patients' families who need flexible admission criteria. Mom added, apparently not realizing that she was confessing to criminal conspiracy involving bribery and corruption of medical professionals. The casual mention of financial leverage over medical professionals was stunning in its implications. My parents were openly describing a criminal network designed to provide fraudulent psychiatric evaluations and unjustified commitment proceedings in exchange for debt forgiveness and financial benefits. Once you're receiving appropriate professional treatment, we'll be able to manage your financial affairs responsibly until you're capable of making rational decisions again. The debt collection issues will be resolved, your workplace problems will be handled appropriately, and you'll get the mental health support you obviously need. Their plan was comprehensive in its criminal scope: fraudulent psychiatric evaluation, unjustified involuntary commitment, illegal guardianship, through forged documents, liquidation of my assets to cover their debts, and long-term control over my finances while I was imprisoned in a psychiatric facility. We understand this is difficult to accept, but sometimes families have to make hard decisions to protect loved ones from their own poor judgment. This intervention is motivated by love and concern for your welfare, not by any desire to control or harm you. The psychological manipulation was expert in its combination of fake concern, false authority, and implied threats designed to break down my resistance to their criminal scheme. They were presenting systematic financial crime and false imprisonment as family intervention motivated by genuine care. As they prepared to leave, apparently expecting me to consider their ultimatum overnight before submitting to their authority, Dad delivered a final threat that revealed the true stakes of their criminal conspiracy. If you continue to resist our efforts to help you, we'll have no choice but to pursue emergency commitment proceedings tomorrow afternoon. Dr. Peterson has already signed preliminary evaluation forms, and Judge Morrison owes our family significant favors that ensure favorable rulings on guardianship petitions. The corruption extended to the judicial system, with judges providing favorable rulings in exchange for personal benefits from my father's construction business. My parents had assembled a comprehensive criminal network capable of overriding legal protections and constitutional rights through systematic corruption. After they left, I immediately called Amy Rodriguez to report the escalation and seek emergency legal protection from the involuntary commitment scheme. The situation had moved beyond simple identity theft into kidnapping, false imprisonment, and conspiracy to deprive civil rights through fraudulent legal proceedings. While hiding in my bedroom, I overheard my parents and Grace planning to use the guardianship to force me into a psychiatric facility permanently, while liquidating all my assets to fund Grace's wedding and their retirement. Friday morning arrived with the kind of bone-chilling cold that makes Denver winters legendary, but the weather was nothing compared to the ice in my veins as I prepared for what I suspected would be the most dangerous day of my life. Amy Rodriguez had arranged for emergency legal protection, but I knew my family wouldn't abandon their criminal scheme without escalating their tactics to match the stakes involved. I'd spent Thursday night moving my most valuable possessions to Amy's office and establishing a safety protocol that involved regular check-ins with her paralegal staff. If I missed scheduled contact times, Amy would immediately notify federal investigators and local police about potential kidnapping or false imprisonment attempts. My apartment felt like a trap as I waited for what I knew would be another confrontation with my family. The temporary manager meeting at work wasn't scheduled until afternoon, giving my parents time to execute whatever emergency commitment procedures they had prepared with their network of corrupt professionals. Around 10:30 in the morning, I heard multiple vehicles pulling into the apartment building's parking lot. Through my window, I could see my parents' SUV, along with Grace's Honda Civic, and a white van that appeared to belong to some kind of medical or security service. The coordination suggested a planned operation involving multiple participants. I quickly retreated to my bedroom and called Amy's emergency line while monitoring the situation through my window. The white van contained two men in uniforms that resembled medical transport services, the kind used to transfer psychiatric patients between facilities. My parents were apparently prepared to physically remove me from my apartment if I refused to submit voluntarily. Amy, they're here with what looks like medical transport. I think they're planning to physically take me to a psychiatric facility today. Chandra, do not open your door under any circumstances. I've already contacted FBI agents who are en route to your location. Stay on the phone with me and document everything you can see or hear. The sound of multiple people climbing the stairs to my floor was followed by authoritative knocking that seemed designed to convey official business. I could hear muffled conversations in the hallway as my family coordinated their approach with the medical transport personnel. Chandra, we have proper legal documentation for emergency psychiatric evaluation. Please open the door so we can proceed with the court-ordered assessment. Dad's voice carried formal authority that suggested he was reading from prepared legal language. I remained silent while recording everything on my phone, knowing that cooperation would result in immediate transport to Pine Ridge Mental Health Facility, where I would face fraudulent psychiatric evaluation designed to support long-term commitment. My silence seemed to frustrate them as the knocking became more insistent. If she won't open the door voluntarily, can we use the emergency entry procedures? Grace's voice was clearly audible through my thin apartment door, apparently asking the medical transport personnel about forced entry options. We have legal authority for emergency psychiatric holds, but we need either voluntary cooperation or police assistance for forced entry. One of the uniformed men replied, explaining procedural requirements that seemed to complicate their timeline. I used my fire escape window to climb onto the building's roof, carrying my phone and maintaining contact with Amy while positioning myself to observe and record their activities from above. The roof access gave me clear views of both my apartment window and the parking lot where additional vehicles might arrive. From my elevated position, I could see into my apartment through the windows as my family and their criminal associates discussed their options. They had apparently expected easy compliance with their authority, and my absence was forcing them to improvise tactics they hadn't fully prepared. She must have gone out the fire escape. Check the roof and surrounding areas while we decide whether to wait for her return or proceed with alternative arrangements. Dad instructed the medical transport personnel, demonstrating leadership of the criminal conspiracy. Grace began searching my apartment for evidence of where I might have gone, looking through my papers and personal belongings, while apparently seeking information about my legal contacts or emergency plans. Her behavior was clearly that of a co-conspirator rather than a concerned sister worried about my welfare. Look for anything that shows she's been talking to lawyers or federal investigators. If she's reported the identity theft to authorities, we need to know what kind of evidence she's provided and how advanced any investigations might be. Mom instructed Grace, revealing awareness that their criminal activities were under potential federal scrutiny. The conversation became more revealing as they realized I wasn't returning immediately and began discussing their longer-term criminal objectives. Grace opened my laptop and attempted to access my email accounts, apparently looking for correspondence with Amy Rodriguez or federal investigators. If we can't get her committed today, we need to accelerate the asset liquidation timeline. My wedding expenses are due next month, and your retirement community deposits are due in March. We can't afford delays in accessing her accounts and insurance policies. Grace explained, revealing financial motivations that extended beyond simple identity theft. The mention of insurance policies was new information that suggested they had been planning my permanent disappearance or incapacitation for financial benefit. Life insurance or disability policies could provide substantial payouts if I were successfully committed to long-term psychiatric care or declared mentally incompetent. Dr. Peterson said the commitment paperwork is valid for 72 hours, so we have until Monday to complete the psychiatric evaluation. If she doesn't return by this afternoon, we'll proceed with the missing person reports and emergency health hold procedures. Dad explained, outlining backup plans for involuntary commitment. Mom was reviewing documents that appeared to contain detailed financial information about my assets, employment benefits, and potential inheritance rights. The paperwork suggested they had been conducting comprehensive research about my financial value to their criminal enterprise. Her employee benefits include a $25,000 life insurance policy that names us as beneficiaries from when she first started working. If the psychiatric commitment is permanent, we might be able to access those funds, along with any disability payments. Mom noted discussing my potential death benefits as if I was already deceased. The casual discussion of insurance benefits revealed that permanent psychiatric commitment was their preferred outcome, rather than temporary control during a mental health crisis. They wanted me permanently eliminated as a threat to their criminal activities while maximizing financial benefits from my disappearance. The wedding venue requires full payment by January 15th, and the destination location in Mexico is perfect because Derek won't be able to investigate our family financial arrangements while he's focused on vacation planning. Grace added, revealing that her engagement to Derek was part of their broader criminal strategy. Derek's marriage to Grace would provide them with ongoing access to information about my workplace situation, while positioning Grace to influence any future employment opportunities I might pursue. The romantic relationship was being weaponized for long-term criminal advantage. Once we establish guardianship and complete the asset transfer, we can relocate to Florida as planned. The Pine Ridge facility has agreements with long-term care institutions that accept permanent psychiatric patients, so geographic distance won't affect our legal authority over her affairs. Dad explained describing plans to abandon me in psychiatric imprisonment while they enjoyed retirement funded by stolen assets. The Florida relocation plan confirmed that they intended permanent separation from me while maintaining legal control over my finances. Geographic distance would make it nearly impossible for me to challenge their guardianship or seek help from local authorities familiar with my situation. Amy's paralegal expertise in identity theft cases could be problematic if Chandra has already filed federal complaints. We need to determine how advanced any criminal investigations might be before we proceed with the final commitment procedures. Mom noted demonstrating awareness that their criminal activities were under potential federal scrutiny. The mention of Amy Rodriguez suggested they had been researching my legal contacts and understood the threat that federal prosecution represented to their criminal enterprise. Their urgency about completing the commitment process was motivated partly by fear of criminal charges. If federal investigators are already involved, the commitment needs to happen immediately. Psychiatric patients have limited credibility as witnesses, and long-term institutionalization would effectively discredit any testimony she might provide about identity theft or financial fraud. Grace explained, revealing that discrediting my potential testimony was a primary motivation for involuntary commitment. The legal strategy was sophisticated in its understanding of how psychiatric commitment could be used to destroy witness credibility, while providing cover for ongoing criminal activity. My imprisonment would serve multiple criminal objectives simultaneously. As I continued recording from the roof, their conversation revealed additional details about the scope of their criminal network and long-term objectives. The corruption extended beyond Dr. Peterson and Judge Morrison to include psychiatric facility administrators, insurance company, contacts, and legal professionals willing to facilitate fraudulent proceedings. The Mexico wedding location also provides convenient access to offshore banking services that Derek's finance contacts recommended for managing large cash transactions. Once the asset liquidation is complete, we'll have multiple options for protecting the funds from potential federal seizure. Grace noted, demonstrating sophisticated money laundering planning. The international component of their criminal enterprise suggested they had been planning comprehensive financial crimes that extended far beyond simple identity theft. Their criminal organization was capable of complex money laundering and asset protection schemes designed to hide stolen funds from federal investigation. Pine Ridge has assured us that long-term commitment can be maintained indefinitely as long as monthly fees are paid promptly. Dr. Peterson's ongoing medical supervision will ensure that Chandra never regains legal capacity to challenge our guardianship or access her own assets. Mom explained describing permanent imprisonment as a manageable long-term expense. The financial planning around my permanent institutionalization was chilling in its casual calculation of costs versus benefits. They viewed my imprisonment as a business expense that would provide years of access to stolen assets while eliminating threats to their criminal activities. As federal agents finally arrived in the parking lot below, I realized I had recorded enough evidence to support comprehensive criminal prosecution that could send my entire family to prison for decades. Their own words had documented conspiracy kidnapping, false imprisonment, money laundering, and numerous other federal crimes that carried maximum sentences. The FBI agents coordinated with local police to surround the building and prevent my family's escape, while Amy Rodriguez arrived with additional legal support to document the criminal conspiracy I had recorded from the roof. The evidence I had gathered would transform their sophisticated criminal enterprise into federal prosecution that could result in life sentences for the most serious charges. I escaped through my fire escape window and used my phone to record my family discussing their criminal plans, gathering evidence while they believed I was trapped in the bedroom. From my position on the apartment building's roof, I had a perfect vantage point to continue recording my family's criminal conspiracy, while federal agents coordinated their response in the parking lot below. Amy Rodriguez had arrived with additional legal support, and I could see FBI personnel setting up surveillance equipment to document the ongoing criminal activity. My phone's memory was nearly full from recording over an hour of incriminating conversations, but I continued documenting as my family grew increasingly desperate in their attempts to locate me and execute their involuntary commitment scheme. Their panic was revealing additional details about their criminal network and backup plans. If she's contacted federal investigators, we need to activate the emergency asset protection protocols immediately. The offshore accounts Derek helped establish can receive wire transfers within hours if we move quickly. Grace instructed Mom while frantically searching my apartment for evidence of my legal contacts. The mention of Derek's involvement in offshore banking arrangements was new information that suggested my sister's romantic relationship had been strategically designed to access financial expertise needed for complex, money laundering operations. Derek had unknowingly provided professional knowledge that facilitated international criminal activity. Dr. Peterson is standing by at Pine Ridge to complete the psychiatric evaluation as soon as we locate her. The facility has agreed to accept emergency admission without full voluntary consent if we can present proper legal documentation. Dad explained to the medical transport personnel, who seemed increasingly uncomfortable with the situation's legal ambiguity. The medical transport workers were clearly not expecting the level of resistance and legal complexity they were encountering. Their body language suggested they were beginning to question whether the documentation my parents had provided was actually legitimate legal authority for emergency psychiatric holds. Ma'am, our company policy requires verification of court orders through official channels before we can transport individuals for involuntary psychiatric evaluation. The documentation you've provided doesn't include case numbers or judicial signatures that we typically see with legitimate emergency holds, one of the uniformed men explained to Mom. Their professional skepticism was forcing my family to reveal more details about their fraudulent legal documents, creating additional evidence of forgery and conspiracy to commit false imprisonment. The medical transport company's reluctance to proceed without proper verification was disrupting their timeline and forcing improvisation. Judge Morrison assured us that the paperwork would be sufficient for emergency transport, and Dr. Peterson confirmed that Pine Ridge accepts patients based on family-initiated emergency holds. We've been planning this intervention for weeks to help our daughter through a mental health crisis. Mom replied, attempting to maintain authority while providing evidence of premeditated criminal conspiracy. Grace was becoming increasingly agitated as she searched my belongings without finding evidence of my current location or legal contacts. She began making phone calls to numbers in my address book, apparently attempting to determine who I might have contacted for help or where I might have gone for safety. None of her contacts are answering, and her laptop password has been changed since Christmas. She must have anticipated our intervention and taken precautions to hide her activities from family oversight. Grace reported to my parents inadvertently documenting their surveillance of my personal communications. The password change comment revealed that my family had been accessing my computer and monitoring my digital communications without authorization, adding computer crimes and privacy violations to their growing list of federal offenses. Their surveillance had been more comprehensive than I had realized. Check her phone records and credit card statements to see if there are patterns that indicate where she might go during emergencies. Her financial data should show contacts with attorneys, medical professionals, or other resources she might use for support. Dad instructed Grace, demonstrating systematic violation of my financial privacy. Mom was reviewing what appeared to be extensive files containing my personal information, including copies of documents that should have been private communications. The depth of their surveillance suggested they had been monitoring my activities for months while planning their criminal intervention. The banking contacts Derek provided said that wire transfers to Cayman Islands accounts need to be initiated before federal investigators freeze domestic assets. If she's already filed criminal complaints, we might only have hours before seizure orders are issued, Grace noted while attempting to access my laptop. The international money laundering timeline revealed that they understood the legal risks of their criminal activities and had prepared sophisticated asset protection strategies to hide stolen funds from federal seizure. Their criminal enterprise was more advanced than simple identity theft. Dr. Peterson said that even if federal investigators become involved, psychiatric patients have limited legal standing to challenge financial arrangements made by appointed guardians. The commitment strategy provides long-term protection for asset management decisions. Mom explained, revealing that permanent psychiatric imprisonment was designed to prevent legal challenges to their theft. The legal strategy demonstrated sophisticated understanding of how involuntary commitment could be used to eliminate my rights while providing cover for ongoing financial crimes. Their criminal planning included detailed analysis of how to neutralize potential opposition through abuse of medical and legal systems. From the roof, I could see federal agents positioning themselves around the building while maintaining communication with Amy Rodriguez about the evidence I was gathering. The coordination between local police and FBI personnel suggested they were prepared for a major criminal arrest operation. If the federal investigation is advanced, we need to consider whether the marriage timeline should be accelerated. Mexican authorities are more flexible about extradition requests, and establishing foreign residency could complicate prosecution efforts. Grace suggested to Derek over the phone, revealing escape planning that involved international flight from prosecution. The conversation about Mexican residency and extradition issues documented sophisticated criminal planning designed to avoid federal prosecution through international relocation. Their criminal enterprise included detailed strategies for avoiding justice through geographic mobility. The retirement community in Florida has connections with legal professionals who specialize in guardianship protection for families dealing with federal investigations. Even if criminal charges are filed, we can maintain financial control through proper legal representation. Dad noted, revealing that their criminal network extended to legal professionals willing to facilitate ongoing theft during federal prosecution. The Florida relocation plan included legal support designed to maintain access to stolen assets even during criminal proceedings, demonstrating that their criminal organization had prepared for potential federal investigation and prosecution. My phone battery was getting low, but I continued recording as their desperation revealed increasingly incriminating details about their criminal activities and future plans. Every minute of conversation provided additional evidence that would support comprehensive federal prosecution. Pine Ridge confirmed that long-term psychiatric patients rarely receive independent legal representation, and family guardians have broad authority over medical and financial decisions. The commitment provides permanent solutions to multiple legal problems. Mom explained describing my imprisonment as a comprehensive strategy for eliminating threats to their criminal enterprise. The clinical discussion of permanent psychiatric imprisonment as a solution to their criminal exposure was perhaps the most chilling evidence I had recorded. They were planning my indefinite incarceration to protect their financial crimes and prevent my testimony in federal court. As federal agents finally moved to enter the building and arrest my family, I realized that the evidence I had gathered from the roof would provide prosecutors with comprehensive documentation of criminal conspiracy that extended far beyond identity theft into kidnapping, money laundering, and systematic corruption of medical and legal professionals. The recordings captured my family's own words describing federal crimes that carried decades in prison, while documenting their sophisticated criminal network and international escape planning. Their panic had revealed details about their criminal activities that federal investigators might have taken months to discover through traditional investigation methods. Amy Rodriguez signaled from the parking lot that federal agents were ready to coordinate my safe descent from the roof, while simultaneously arresting my family and their criminal associates. The evidence-gathering phase was complete, and the justice phase was beginning with comprehensive criminal charges that could send them to federal prison for the rest of their lives. Amy helped me file federal identity theft charges while simultaneously reporting the guardianship fraud to Adult Protective Services and the State Bar Association, triggering multiple investigations. Federal agents escorted me down from the apartment building roof, while my family and their criminal associates were simultaneously arrested in coordinated operations that demonstrated the scope of law enforcement response to their criminal enterprise. The sight of my parents and Grace being handcuffed and read their rights felt surreal after years of accepting their manipulation and abuse. Amy Rodriguez met me at the FBI field office downtown, where special agents had established a comprehensive investigation center dedicated to unraveling the financial crimes my family had committed. The recorded evidence from the roof had provided investigators with unprecedented documentation of criminal conspiracy that extended far beyond simple identity theft. Chandra, what you recorded this morning has given federal prosecutors enough evidence to file charges under multiple federal statutes. We're looking at identity theft wire fraud, conspiracy to commit kidnapping, money laundering corruption of medical professionals, and abuse of legal processes. Amy explained as we reviewed the criminal charges that would be filed within hours. Special Agent Patricia Chen led the FBI Financial Crimes Task Force assigned to my case, and she explained how the recorded conversations had revealed criminal activities that investigators typically spent months trying to document. My family's panic had caused them to confess to federal crimes while believing they were planning my permanent imprisonment. The offshore banking arrangements your sister discussed involve international money laundering that brings federal agencies beyond the FBI into this investigation. Treasury Department financial crimes units are already coordinating with banking regulators in multiple countries to trace and freeze assets your family attempted to hide, Agent Chen explained. The international scope of their criminal activities had triggered cooperation between multiple federal agencies and foreign financial authorities, creating a comprehensive investigation network that could trace stolen assets regardless of where my family had attempted to hide them. Their sophisticated money laundering efforts had actually expanded their legal exposure rather than providing protection. Amy had prepared comprehensive documentation packages for filing complaints with multiple agencies, simultaneously maximizing the legal pressure on my family while protecting me from potential retaliation during the criminal proceedings. Each agency would conduct independent investigations that could result in separate prosecutions. We're filing federal criminal complaints with the FBI for identity theft and financial fraud, reporting the guardianship fraud attempt to Adult Protective Services for elder abuse investigation, notifying the State Bar Association about the corrupt attorneys involved, and alerting medical licensing boards about Dr. Peterson's fraudulent psychiatric evaluations. Amy explained. The multi-agency approach would prevent my family from focusing their legal defense on any single set of charges, while ensuring that all the corrupt professionals in their criminal network faced appropriate disciplinary action from their respective regulatory authorities. Every participant in their conspiracy would face consequences for their criminal choices. Agent Chen reviewed the evidence timeline with us, explaining how the recorded conversations provided clear documentation of criminal intent and conspiracy that would be nearly impossible for defense attorneys to challenge in federal court. My family had essentially confessed to federal crimes while planning additional criminal activities. Your recording from this morning captures your family discussing specific federal crimes, including conspiracy to commit kidnapping, money laundering through international banking, corruption of medical professionals, and fraud against federal financial institutions. Each of these charges carries potential sentences of 15 to 20 years in federal prison, Agent Chen noted. The federal sentencing guidelines for the crimes my family had committed were severe enough to effectively guarantee life imprisonment for my parents, who were both over 50 years old. Grace's younger age might allow her to eventually return to society, but only after spending the majority of her adult life in federal prison. Amy's legal strategy included immediate action to protect my financial assets and credit rating. While the criminal investigations proceeded, federal prosecutors would seek court orders freezing my family's assets and requiring restitution that could restore my financial stability within months rather than years. Federal victim restitution programs are designed to make identity theft victims financially whole while ensuring that criminals can't benefit from their crimes. Your family will be required to provide complete financial disclosure and asset forfeiture to compensate you for the damages they've caused, Amy explained. The restitution process would include not only the direct financial damages from identity theft, but also compensation for lost wages, damaged credit, emotional distress, and legal expenses related to resolving their crimes. Federal courts had broad authority to ensure that victims received comprehensive compensation from criminal assets. Agent Chen introduced additional federal prosecutors who would be handling different aspects of the criminal case, including specialists in international financial crimes, medical fraud, and conspiracy prosecutions. The complexity of my family's criminal activities required expertise from multiple areas of federal law enforcement. The medical fraud aspects of this case involve conspiracy with Dr. Peterson to provide fraudulent psychiatric evaluations for involuntary commitment. Medical fraud carries enhanced penalties when it's combined with kidnapping and false imprisonment charges, explained Assistant U.S. Attorney Michael Rodriguez, who specialized in healthcare fraud prosecutions. Dr. Peterson was being arrested simultaneously with my family, along with staff members at Pine Ridge Mental Health Facility, who had agreed to accept patients for involuntary commitment without proper legal documentation. The corrupt medical network my family had assembled was being systematically dismantled through coordinated federal action. The State Bar Association investigation would focus on Judge Morrison and any attorneys who had provided fraudulent legal documents or participated in the guardianship fraud scheme. Legal professionals who had corrupted judicial processes for personal benefit faced disbarment and potential criminal charges for obstruction of justice. Corruption of judicial processes is taken extremely seriously by federal prosecutors because it undermines the entire legal system's integrity. Judge Morrison's involvement in providing favorable rulings in exchange for personal benefits could result in federal corruption charges that carry sentences comparable to the financial crimes, noted federal prosecutor Sarah Kim. Amy coordinated with Adult Protective Services to ensure that my family's criminal activities were investigated for potential additional victims among elderly or vulnerable individuals who might have been targeted for similar identity theft and financial exploitation. Their criminal methods suggested they might have victimized other family members or community members. Adult Protective Services is conducting comprehensive reviews of all financial arrangements involving your parents over the past 5 years. If they've used similar identity theft methods against other vulnerable individuals, those victims will be identified and provided with legal assistance for recovery, Amy explained. The investigation scope continued expanding as federal agencies discovered additional aspects of my family's criminal activities through computer forensics and financial record analysis. Their criminal enterprise was more extensive than even I had realized during my initial identity theft discovery. Agent Chen showed me computer evidence that had been recovered from my family's devices, revealing detailed planning documents for their criminal activities, including victim financial analysis, timeline planning for involuntary commitment, and coordination with corrupt professionals. The digital evidence provided comprehensive documentation of premeditated criminal conspiracy. Your family maintained detailed records of their criminal activities, apparently believing they would never face investigation or prosecution. These records provide federal prosecutors with evidence that would typically take months or years to develop through traditional investigation methods, Agent Chen noted. The digital evidence included email communications with offshore banking contacts. Derek had provided financial planning documents for retirement funded by stolen assets and coordination with medical professionals for fraudulent psychiatric evaluations. Every aspect of their criminal conspiracy was documented in their own files. Federal prosecutors explained that the strength of the evidence would likely result in plea bargain negotiations, where my family would accept lengthy prison sentences in exchange for avoiding trial and maximum penalties. The recorded conversations and digital evidence made successful defense against criminal charges nearly impossible. Most federal financial crime cases with this level of evidence result in plea agreements where defendants accept responsibility and lengthy sentences in exchange for avoiding potential life imprisonment from maximum penalty guidelines, explained Assistant U.S. Attorney Rodriguez. The plea bargain process would include detailed financial disclosure requirements that would help federal investigators locate all stolen assets and hidden funds, ensuring comprehensive restitution for victims, while preventing my family from hiding resources that could be used for legal defense or post-prison survival. Amy coordinated with federal prosecutors to ensure that victim impact statements would be prepared for sentencing hearings, allowing me to address the court about how my family's crimes had affected every aspect of my life, from employment to housing to future financial prospects. Federal sentencing guidelines require consideration of victim impact when determining appropriate penalties for financial crimes. Your testimony about the comprehensive damage your family caused will influence the court's sentencing decisions, Amy explained. As the day progressed, federal agencies continued discovering additional aspects of my family's criminal activities, while coordinating with international authorities to freeze offshore assets and prevent further money laundering. Their sophisticated criminal enterprise was being systematically dismantled through comprehensive law enforcement cooperation. The legal counterattack Amy had coordinated was transforming my family's criminal conspiracy into federal prosecution that would result in decades of imprisonment while providing me with complete financial restoration and legal protection from any future criminal activities they might attempt. Armed with legal documentation of my innocence, I confronted Derek and presented him with evidence of Grace's manipulation, leading to Grace's public humiliation when Derek broke up with her in front of coworkers. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp clarity that follows major storms, and I felt a similar sense of resolution as I prepared to address my workplace situation with comprehensive legal documentation of my innocence. Amy Rodriguez had provided me with federal victim status letters, criminal complaint documentation, and official statements from law enforcement agencies confirming that I was the victim of systematic criminal activity, rather than someone avoiding legitimate debts. The temporary manager sent by corporate headquarters had postponed Friday's meeting due to the federal criminal investigation, and Derek had requested an emergency conference to discuss the new information about Grace's manipulation and criminal conspiracy. The regional management team wanted to understand how their employee policies had been compromised by criminal activity. I arrived at Mountain View Mall carrying a professional portfolio containing federal documentation that would completely exonerate me while exposing Grace's systematic manipulation of workplace policies through her romantic relationship with Derek. The evidence would transform me from a liability into a victim deserving corporate support and legal protection. Derek was waiting in the store manager's office along with regional manager Patricia Williams and corporate security director James Anderson, both of whom had driven from Colorado Springs to personally review the situation. Their presence indicated that corporate headquarters was taking the criminal aspects of this case seriously enough to warrant executive-level attention. Chandra, we owe you a significant apology for the way this situation has been handled. The federal documentation you've provided clearly establishes that you're the victim of serious criminal activity, and we're here to discuss how the company can support you during the ongoing legal proceedings. Patricia Williams began her tone, reflecting corporate concern about potential liability for discriminatory treatment. Derek appeared visibly shaken as he reviewed the federal criminal complaint documents that detailed Grace's role in the conspiracy and her systematic manipulation of workplace policies through false information about my character and financial situation. His personal relationship had been weaponized against both of us without his knowledge or consent. I had no idea Grace was providing false information about your family situation or that she was participating in criminal activity against you. Everything she told me about your financial struggles was apparently designed to damage your professional reputation while setting up justification for the debt collection issues. Derek explained, his voice reflecting genuine remorse, mixed with anger about being manipulated. Corporate Security Director Anderson was particularly interested in the recorded conversations that documented Grace's workplace manipulation and her coordination with criminal family members to undermine my employment stability. The evidence showed that corporate policies had been subverted through deliberate misinformation campaigns. The federal investigation has provided us with evidence that Ms. Mitchell systematically provided false information to management personnel for the purpose of damaging your professional reputation and employment prospects. This represents a serious breach of trust that affects our entire management structure, Anderson noted. Patricia Williams explained that corporate policy required immediate correction of any employment actions that had been based on false information, provided by individuals with conflicts of interest. My employment record would be completely cleared, and I would receive retroactive compensation for any lost wages or advancement opportunities. We're implementing a promotion to assistant manager with retroactive pay increases dating back 6 months, along with educational assistance benefits and priority consideration for management training programs. The company takes responsibility for management decisions that were influenced by false information, Williams announced. The corporate response exceeded anything I could have expected, transforming my employment situation from threatened termination to career advancement with comprehensive support for professional development. Their legal liability concerns were motivating genuine efforts to compensate for the discriminatory treatment I had experienced. Derek was struggling to process how completely he had been manipulated by Grace while making employment decisions that affected my professional future. His genuine distress about being used as a tool for criminal activity was obvious as he reviewed the evidence of Grace's systematic deception. I keep thinking about all the conversations where Grace was feeding me information about your supposed financial problems and irresponsible behavior. She was so convincing because she seemed genuinely concerned about family dynamics and your personal development. Derek reflected clearly, questioning his judgment about romantic relationships and professional boundaries. Corporate Security Director Anderson explained that Grace would be permanently banned from all company properties and that restraining orders would be sought to prevent any future contact with company employees. Her manipulation of workplace policies through personal relationships had created security concerns that extended beyond my individual situation. The criminal conspiracy Ms. Mitchell participated in demonstrates sophisticated planning and deception that could threaten other employees if she's allowed continued access to company information or personnel. Her permanent exclusion from company properties is necessary for workplace security, Anderson noted. As we concluded the corporate meeting, Derek asked to speak with me privately about how Grace's manipulation had affected both our professional relationship and his personal understanding of the criminal conspiracy that had targeted me. His anger about being used as an unwitting tool for criminal activity was intensifying as he processed the full scope of her deception. "Chandra, I need to apologize not just as your manager, but as someone who was manipulated into participating in criminal activity against you without realizing what was happening. Grace used our relationship to damage your career while I thought I was making objective management decisions." Derek's realization that he had been a victim of manipulation alongside me was creating a bond of shared experience that transcended our workplace hierarchy. We had both been targeted by Grace's criminal conspiracy, though in different ways and with different consequences. Tuesday afternoon brought an unexpected visit from Grace to the store, apparently unaware that her arrest and the federal criminal charges had been communicated to corporate security and that she was no longer welcome on company property. Her attempt to maintain normal contact with Derek demonstrated remarkable denial about how dramatically her situation had changed. Grace entered the store during our busiest afternoon period when customers were browsing clearance merchandise and the staff was focused on sales transactions. She approached Derek at the customer service counter with her usual confident demeanor, apparently expecting to continue their relationship as if nothing had changed. "Derek, I tried calling you all weekend, but your phone went straight to voicemail. I wanted to talk about the wedding planning timeline and some of the vendor deposits that are coming due next month." Grace began seemingly oblivious to Derek's shocked expression and the attention her presence was drawing from nearby customers and employees. "Grace, you shouldn't be here. I know about the federal criminal charges and your role in manipulating information about Chandra. Our relationship is over and you need to leave the store immediately." Derek replied, his voice carrying enough authority to make nearby customers pause and observe the confrontation. Grace's confident expression crumbled as she realized that Derek had learned about her criminal activities and was publicly rejecting her in front of store employees and customers. Her attempts to maintain control of the narrative were failing as the reality of her legal situation became undeniable. "Derek, whatever Chandra told you about my family's financial arrangements is probably exaggerated or misunderstood. We can work through any misunderstandings if you'll just give me a chance to explain what really happened." Grace pleaded, apparently still believing she could manipulate the situation through emotional appeals. Derek's response was loud enough for the entire customer service area to hear, ensuring that Grace's humiliation would be witnessed by multiple people, including several of my coworkers who'd been gossiping about my supposed financial problems just weeks earlier. "Grace, you participated in federal crimes against your own sister, including identity theft conspiracy to commit kidnapping and money laundering. You manipulated our relationship to damage Chandra's employment prospects while lying to me about your family's criminal activities. I want nothing to do with you ever again." The public rejection in front of customers and employees created exactly the kind of social humiliation that Grace had orchestrated for me during Christmas morning. But this time, she was experiencing the consequences of her own criminal choices. Several customers were openly staring as Grace's composure completely collapsed. This is all a misunderstanding that got blown out of proportion because Chandra couldn't handle reasonable family expectations about financial responsibility. You're throwing away our entire future together, based on lies and exaggerations. Grace continued, her voice becoming increasingly desperate as Derek remained unmoved by her emotional manipulation. Sarah, the young employee who had originally overheard the debt collection calls, was watching the confrontation with obvious fascination as she realized that Grace was the sister whose criminal activity had caused my workplace problems. The reversal of our situations was creating workplace drama that would be discussed for months. Security is on the way to escort you from the property, and you're permanently banned from all company locations. If you try to contact me or any other employees, we'll seek restraining orders and report violations to federal investigators, Derek announced, ensuring that Grace understood the complete collapse of her social and romantic connections. Grace's final attempt at manipulation involved threatening to reveal embarrassing personal information about Derek to customers and employees, but her threats only reinforced his decision to permanently end their relationship and support the criminal prosecution she was facing. "Go ahead and tell everyone whatever you want, Grace. They'll know you're a convicted felon who manipulated workplace relationships to commit crimes against your own family. Your credibility is completely destroyed," Derek replied, delivering the final blow to Grace's social standing in our workplace community. As mall security arrived to escort Grace from the property, she made increasingly desperate threats and promises that revealed her complete inability to accept responsibility for the criminal consequences of her choices. Her public breakdown provided satisfying confirmation that justice was being served through multiple channels. The workplace community that had once gossiped about my financial problems was now witnessing Grace's humiliation as a criminal whose manipulation had corrupted management decisions and damaged innocent employees. The reversal was complete and public in ways that provided emotional satisfaction alongside legal justice. Derek's public rejection of Grace and his support for the criminal prosecution demonstrated that her manipulation had ultimately failed to achieve its intended objectives. Instead of destroying my professional reputation and employment prospects, her criminal conspiracy had resulted in her own social and legal destruction, while elevating my career prospects within the company. Federal agents arrested my parents at Grace's workplace during a busy afternoon, charging them with identity theft, fraud, conspiracy, and attempted unlawful commitment, while Grace faced charges as an accessory. Wednesday afternoon brought news that federal prosecutors had coordinated the arrests of my entire family in ways designed to maximize public exposure of their criminal activities, while ensuring that their professional and social communities understood the serious nature of the charges they were facing. The timing and locations of the arrests were strategically chosen to create consequences beyond just legal penalties. Amy Rodriguez called me at work to report that my parents had been arrested at Grace's marketing firm during a busy client presentation, creating maximum professional embarrassment, while ensuring that Grace's criminal activities became public knowledge among her colleagues and business contacts. The coordination between arrests was designed to demonstrate the conspiracy's scope. Federal agents timed the arrests to occur during Grace's most important client meeting of the year, when she was presenting a major marketing campaign to corporate executives. The handcuffs went on right in the conference room while she was explaining brand development strategies. Amy reported her tone reflecting satisfaction with the public nature of justice being served. Grace's marketing career had been built partly on the confidence and financial stability provided by criminal proceeds from identity theft, and her arrest during a professional presentation would destroy her reputation in Denver's business community permanently. The criminal charges would make her unemployable in her chosen profession. Your parents were charged with 12 counts of federal identity theft, 8 counts of wire fraud, conspiracy to commit kidnapping, money laundering through international banking, and corruption of medical and legal professionals. Grace was charged as an accessory to all these crimes, plus conspiracy to obstruct justice, Amy explained. The federal charging documents were comprehensive in their documentation of criminal activity, based largely on the recorded conversations I had captured from my apartment building roof. My family's own words provided prosecutors with evidence that would make successful legal defense nearly impossible. Agent Patricia Chen contacted me later that afternoon to explain how the arrests had been coordinated with raids on Dr. Peterson's medical practice, Judge Morrison's chambers, and Pine Ridge Mental Health Facility. The entire criminal network my family had assembled was being dismantled simultaneously through federal law enforcement action. Dr. Peterson was arrested at his office while conducting patient consultations, and medical licensing authorities immediately suspended his practice pending criminal trial. Judge Morrison was taken into custody at the courthouse, and judicial disciplinary boards have initiated emergency proceedings to remove him from the bench, Agent Chen reported. The corrupt professionals who had enabled my family's criminal conspiracy were facing career destruction alongside criminal penalties, ensuring that their ability to harm other victims through abuse of medical and legal authority would be permanently eliminated. Their professional credentials were being stripped away as quickly as their freedom. Federal prosecutors had also coordinated with banking regulators to freeze all accounts associated with my family's money laundering activities, including the offshore arrangements Derek had unknowingly helped establish. The sophisticated asset protection strategies Grace had boasted about were proving ineffective against comprehensive federal investigation. Treasury Department forensic accountants have identified over $400,000 in assets that can be traced to identity theft proceeds, including funds that were transferred to international accounts. All these assets are being seized for victim restitution. Agent Chen explained. The asset seizure included my parents' house, their vehicles, Grace's Honda Civic, and personal property that had been purchased with stolen funds. Their comfortable middle-class lifestyle was being completely dismantled as prosecutors worked to ensure comprehensive restitution for their crimes. Grace's arrest at her workplace had been particularly devastating because she was in the middle of presenting a major marketing campaign to executives from a Fortune 500 company. Federal agents had coordinated with her employer to ensure maximum professional damage while providing clear evidence of her criminal activities to business colleagues. The client presentation was being conducted in a glass conference room that was visible to most of the office staff, so Grace's arrest was witnessed by dozens of her coworkers and the client executives she had been trying to impress. Amy reported with evident satisfaction. The marketing firm immediately terminated Grace's employment and issued statements to clients explaining that an employee had been arrested for federal crimes and that any work product associated with that employee was being reviewed for potential contamination. Grace's professional reputation was being systematically destroyed by the consequences of her criminal choices. Local news media had picked up the story of family identity theft involving sophisticated criminal conspiracy, and Grace's arrest during a business presentation provided compelling footage for television news broadcasts. Her criminal activities were becoming public knowledge throughout Denver's business and social communities. Channel 7 News ran a feature story about family identity theft, using your case as an example of how sophisticated these criminal conspiracies can become. Grace's arrest footage was broadcast during the evening news with full identification of her name and employer, Amy noted. The media coverage was ensuring that Grace's criminal activities would be remembered by potential employers and social contacts for years after her eventual release from federal prison. Her identity was becoming permanently associated with serious criminal activity that betrayed family trust. My parents' arrest had occurred at Grace's workplace partly to demonstrate the family coordination of criminal activities, while maximizing the social consequences for their choices. Federal prosecutors wanted their criminal conspiracy to be understood as systematic rather than opportunistic, requiring lengthy prison sentences to deter similar crimes. Federal sentencing guidelines for the charges your family is facing typically result in 15 to 20-year prison terms for first-time offenders, but the sophisticated nature of their criminal conspiracy and the vulnerable victim targeting could result in enhanced penalties, Agent Chen explained. The vulnerable victim enhancement applied because their crimes had specifically targeted a family member who trusted them and had no reason to suspect criminal activity. Federal courts imposed enhanced penalties for crimes that exploited trust relationships and vulnerable individuals. Derek had provided federal investigators with additional evidence about Grace's manipulation tactics and her discussions of criminal activities during their relationship. His testimony would support conspiracy charges while demonstrating the comprehensive nature of Grace's criminal planning. Derek's cooperation with federal investigators includes recorded phone conversations where Grace discussed criminal activities and asset protection strategies. His evidence shows that Grace was actively planning international flight to avoid prosecution. Agent Chen noted. The evidence of flight planning would complicate any bail requests Grace might make while strengthening federal arguments for lengthy sentences that would prevent future criminal activity. Her sophisticated criminal planning was being used against her during prosecution. Pine Ridge Mental Health Facility was facing federal investigation for participating in fraudulent involuntary commitment schemes, and several staff members had been arrested for conspiracy to violate civil rights. The facility's business license was being suspended pending completion of criminal proceedings. The facility investigation has revealed that Pine Ridge accepted dozens of patients for involuntary commitment without proper legal documentation, apparently operating a business model based on fraudulent psychiatric detention for family financial benefit, Agent Chen explained. The broader investigation was revealing that my family's criminal activities were part of larger patterns of abuse involving corrupt medical and legal professionals who facilitated crimes against vulnerable individuals. Their arrest was helping to expose systematic criminal enterprises that had operated undetected for years. Federal prosecutors were preparing comprehensive victim impact documentation that would demonstrate how my family's crimes had affected every aspect of my life, from employment to housing to future financial prospects. The extensive damage they had caused would influence sentencing decisions and restitution requirements. As news of the arrests spread through Denver's business and social communities, I began receiving calls from acquaintances who had heard about my family's criminal activities through media coverage. The public nature of their prosecution was providing vindication that extended beyond legal proceedings into social recognition of their criminal behavior. The comprehensive arrests and criminal charges represented complete justice for the systematic abuse my family had inflicted, while providing protection from any future criminal activities they might attempt. Their sophisticated criminal conspiracy had been thoroughly documented and prosecuted, ensuring lengthy prison sentences that would prevent harm to additional victims. The federal investigation uncovered that my parents had been running similar identity theft schemes against other family members and neighbors, leading to a class action lawsuit that awarded me substantial damages. 2 months after my family's arrest, the scope of their criminal enterprise continued expanding as federal investigators uncovered additional victims and criminal activities that transformed their prosecution from isolated family identity theft into comprehensive financial fraud that had affected dozens of people over several years. The investigation was revealing systematic criminal behavior that extended far beyond my individual situation. Amy Rodriguez contacted me with updates about the federal investigation that had uncovered additional victims among extended family members, former neighbors, and even some of my parents' construction company clients. The systematic nature of their criminal activities was providing prosecutors with evidence for enhanced sentences, while creating opportunities for substantial victim restitution. Federal investigators have identified 23 additional victims of your parents' identity theft schemes, including your grandmother, 2 of your aunts, and several elderly neighbors who trusted your parents with access to personal information. Amy reported during our weekly legal update meeting. The discovery of elderly victims was triggering additional federal charges for targeting vulnerable populations, which carried enhanced penalties under federal sentencing guidelines. My parents had been systematically exploiting trust relationships throughout their community while maintaining facades of respectable middle-class citizenship. The total amount of fraudulent activity now exceeds $800,000 when you include all the additional victims federal investigators have identified. This moves your parents' criminal enterprise into organized crime categories that carry potential life sentences, Amy explained. Agent Patricia Chen provided detailed briefings about how computer forensics had revealed extensive criminal planning documents that showed my parents had been operating sophisticated identity theft schemes for over 5 years. Their criminal activities were far more comprehensive and organized than anyone had initially suspected. Your parents maintain detailed victim files, including credit histories, financial assets, family relationship analysis, and vulnerability assessments that they used to target individuals for identity theft. This documentation proves systematic criminal enterprise rather than opportunistic fraud, Agent Chen explained. The victim files included disturbing personal information about family members and neighbors, including assessments of who would be most likely to detect identity theft quickly and who could be victimized for extended periods without discovery. Their criminal planning demonstrated predatory targeting of vulnerable individuals. Federal prosecutors had filed additional charges including racketeering, organized criminal enterprise, and elder abuse based on the expanded victim evidence. The racketeering charges allowed prosecutors to seek forfeiture of all assets connected to their criminal activities over the past 5 years. RICO charges enable federal prosecutors to seize everything your parents own that can be connected to criminal proceeds, including real estate vehicles, personal property, and financial accounts. The asset forfeiture will provide substantial funds for victim restitution, Amy noted. The expanded criminal charges were attracting attention from federal prosecutors specializing in organized crime, who recognized that my parents' systematic approach to identity theft represented criminal enterprise worthy of maximum penalties. Their sophisticated victim targeting and asset protection strategies demonstrated criminal organization that required lengthy incarceration. Assistant U.S. Attorney Jennifer Walsh has been assigned to handle the organized crime aspects of this prosecution. She typically handles cases involving multi-million-dollar criminal enterprises and has a conviction rate that approaches 100% for racketeering charges, Amy explained. The class action lawsuit Amy had filed on behalf of all identified victims was attracting additional legal expertise from firms specializing in large-scale financial fraud recovery. The comprehensive victim damages were creating opportunities for substantial settlements that could provide complete financial restoration for everyone affected by my parents' crimes. Morrison Kim and Associates has agreed to represent the victim class action on a contingency basis because the federal asset seizures guarantee substantial recovery funds. Their expertise in complex financial fraud cases will maximize restitution for all victims, Amy reported. My grandmother's victimization was particularly disturbing because my parents had used her dementia diagnosis to justify accessing her financial accounts while systematically draining her retirement savings over 2 years. The elder abuse charges carried enhanced penalties that could add decades to their prison sentences. Your grandmother lost over $60,000 in retirement savings that your parents transferred to offshore accounts while claiming they were managing her finances during her illness. The elder abuse charges for this activity carry mandatory minimum sentences of 15 years, Amy explained. The federal investigation had also uncovered evidence that my parents had been using their construction company to access client personal information for identity theft purposes. Business clients who had provided Social Security numbers for background checks had become victims of systematic identity theft. Construction company client files contained personal information from over 40 homeowners who had hired your parents for renovation projects. Federal investigators believe that at least 15 of these clients became identity theft victims through access to personal information obtained during business relationships. Agent Chen noted, the business-related identity theft was triggering additional federal charges for commercial fraud and violation of consumer protection statutes. My parents' construction company was being liquidated to provide additional restitution funds while their business licenses were permanently revoked. Derek had provided federal investigators with additional information about offshore banking arrangements he had unknowingly helped Grace establish, His financial expertise had been manipulated to create sophisticated money laundering systems that prosecutors were now unraveling to recover stolen assets. Derek's cooperation led investigators to discover over $200,000 in offshore accounts that your family had hidden using complex banking arrangements. His testimony about Grace's manipulation tactics is helping prosecutors understand how their criminal conspiracy operated, Amy reported. The offshore asset recovery was involving cooperation between federal agencies and international banking authorities in 3 countries. The comprehensive investigation was demonstrating that my family's criminal enterprise had reached levels of sophistication typically associated with organized crime syndicates. Federal victim advocates had been assigned to help all identified victims navigate the restitution process and understand their rights during the criminal proceedings. The victim support services were providing counseling, legal assistance, and financial planning help for people whose lives had been devastated by systematic identity theft. The Federal Victim Restitution Program will provide complete financial restoration plus punitive damages for all victims. Based on the asset seizures and criminal penalties, most victims will receive compensation that exceeds their direct financial losses, Amy explained. My individual restitution was calculated at over $150,000, including direct financial damages, lost wages, credit repair costs, emotional distress, compensation, and punitive damages. The federal court was ensuring that criminal proceeds would be completely transferred to victims rather than benefiting the criminals who had stolen them. Your restitution includes funds for purchasing a house since your parents' criminal activities prevented you from achieving home ownership goals you would have reached without their interference. Federal victim compensation recognizes both actual losses and prevented opportunities, Amy noted. The homeownership assistance was particularly meaningful because it represented recovery of future opportunities that had been stolen along with my immediate financial stability. Federal prosecutors understood that identity theft damaged victims' long-term prospects as well as immediate financial situations. Additional victims continued being identified as federal investigators expanded their analysis of my parents' criminal activities. The systematic nature of their crimes was revealing patterns that helped identify other individuals who might have been victimized without realizing their personal information had been compromised. Federal investigators are contacting everyone who had business or personal relationships with your parents over the past 5 years to determine if they might have been targeted for identity theft. The victim identification process could continue for several more months, Agent Chen explained. The expanding victim list was strengthening federal arguments for maximum criminal sentences while providing additional restitution funds through comprehensive asset seizure. My parents' systematic criminal behavior was ensuring that they would spend the remainder of their lives in federal prison while providing substantial financial recovery for all their victims. The class action settlement was approaching finalization with total victim compensation exceeding $2 million, including federal asset seizures, criminal restitution, and punitive damages. The comprehensive financial recovery was transforming the devastating impact of my family's crimes into opportunities for victims to rebuild their lives with greater financial security than they had possessed before becoming targets. 6 months later, I had opened a successful financial consulting business, helping other identity theft victims, and Amy had become my romantic partner as our friendship deepened through the legal battle. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my new office in downtown Denver's financial district, illuminating the professional space that represented everything my family had tried to prevent me from achieving. 6 months after federal prosecution had dismantled their criminal enterprise, I was operating a thriving business that transformed my traumatic experience into expertise that helped other victims rebuild their lives. Chandler Financial Recovery Services occupied a corner suite in a renovated historic building, with exposed brick walls and modern technology, creating an environment that felt both professional and welcoming to clients dealing with financial trauma. The business had grown from a single desk to a team of 5 specialists within 4 months of opening. Amy Rodriguez had become much more than my legal advocate during the months of criminal proceedings and business development. Our professional partnership had evolved into a personal relationship that demonstrated how genuine support differed from the manipulative family dynamics I had previously accepted as normal love and care. "Good morning, partner," Amy said as she entered my office carrying coffee and the morning's case files, her smile reflecting both professional satisfaction and personal affection that had developed naturally during our collaboration on victim advocacy work. Our romantic relationship had begun during late-night preparation sessions for federal testimony when shared commitment to justice and mutual respect created emotional intimacy that transcended professional boundaries. The contrast with Grace's manipulative approach to relationships was striking in its authenticity and mutual support. We have consultations with 3 new clients today, including a grandmother whose adult children stole over $40,000 from her retirement accounts. Amy reported reviewing the schedule that demonstrated how our specialized expertise was attracting clients from across the Rocky Mountain region. The business model was unique in the financial services industry, combining legal advocacy with credit repair services and emotional support for victims whose families had betrayed their trust. Our comprehensive approach addressed both practical recovery needs and psychological trauma that traditional financial advisors often overlooked. The Morrison case is particularly interesting because it involves medical identity theft, where the victim's adult son used her insurance information to obtain expensive medical procedures. The insurance fraud aspects will require coordination with federal healthcare investigators. I noted reviewing documentation that showed how identity theft methods continued evolving. Our client base included victims of family identity theft, elder abuse, medical fraud, and business-related financial crimes. The specialized expertise I had developed through my own victimization was proving invaluable for helping others navigate complex legal and financial recovery processes. Amy's legal practice had similarly evolved to focus exclusively on financial fraud cases, with particular expertise in family, perpetrated crimes that traditional prosecutors often treated less seriously than stranger identity theft. Our combined expertise was creating successful outcomes for clients who had previously felt hopeless about recovery. The federal prosecutors in the Chen case want to use our victim impact documentation as a model for other family identity theft prosecutions. Your expertise in quantifying the comprehensive damages these crimes cause is helping other victims receive appropriate compensation, Amy explained. The business success was satisfying not just financially, but emotionally as it transformed my family's criminal betrayal into professional purpose that helped other victims achieve justice and financial recovery. Every successful client outcome validated my decision to seek federal prosecution rather than accepting family manipulation. Channel 9 wants to interview us about the increase in family identity theft cases and how victims can protect themselves while seeking recovery. The media attention is helping raise awareness about how serious these crimes really are. Amy noted reviewing requests for expert commentary that demonstrated our growing reputation in the victim advocacy community. The media interviews provided opportunities to educate the public about warning signs of family financial abuse, while encouraging other victims to seek professional help rather than trying to resolve criminal activity through family negotiations. Our expertise was contributing to broader social awareness about these often hidden crimes. The office space included a comfortable conference room where clients could discuss traumatic experiences in privacy, along with a resource library containing legal references, financial planning materials, and emotional support resources. The environment was designed to provide comprehensive assistance for victims dealing with complex recovery needs. The Peterson Referral Network is sending us an average of 2 new clients per week, mostly from therapists who specialize in family trauma. The combination of financial recovery and emotional healing is proving essential for long-term victim success. I observed reviewing client outcomes that demonstrated the importance of addressing psychological impacts alongside financial damages. Our success rate for achieving complete financial recovery was approaching 90%, significantly higher than traditional credit repair services, because our comprehensive approach addressed the underlying criminal activities rather than just correcting credit report errors. Clients received actual justice rather than temporary fixes. Amy's presence in my life provided emotional stability that contrasted sharply with the chaos and manipulation that had characterized my family relationships. Her genuine support and professional respect had helped me understand what healthy relationships actually looked like when based on mutual care rather than exploitation. I've been thinking about the expansion proposal for our Colorado Springs office. The demand for our services is strong enough to support a second location, and it would help us serve clients from the southern regions more effectively. Amy suggested discussing growth plans that reflected our shared vision for helping more victims. The business expansion would include additional legal advocates and financial specialists trained in our comprehensive recovery methodology. Our success in Denver was creating demand for similar services throughout Colorado and neighboring states, where few resources existed for family identity theft victims. The Federal Victim Assistance Grant application was approved for next year's funding. The Department of Justice recognizes that our model provides better outcomes for identity theft victims than traditional approaches that separate legal, financial, and emotional recovery services. I reported reviewing funding that would support expansion while maintaining affordable services. The federal funding recognition validated our comprehensive approach while providing resources to help victims who couldn't afford full market rates for professional recovery services. The grant would ensure that financial circumstances wouldn't prevent access to specialized help for criminal victimization. Our evening routine had evolved to include dinner planning and household coordination that demonstrated how adult relationships could involve mutual support without manipulation or exploitation. The contrast with my family's dynamics was evident in every interaction that prioritized both partners' well-being equally. Your federal testimony for the Henderson case is scheduled for next month. The prosecutors want to use your expertise to help the jury understand how family identity theft affects victims differently than stranger crimes. Amy noted reviewing my continuing role as an expert witness in federal prosecutions. The expert witness work provided additional income while contributing to criminal justice outcomes that protected other potential victims. My traumatic experience was being transformed into professional expertise that strengthened federal prosecution of similar crimes. I love how our work actually makes a difference in people's lives while building something meaningful together. Amy reflected, expressing sentiments that captured both professional satisfaction and personal fulfillment from our partnership. The relationship with Amy represented recovery that extended beyond financial restitution into emotional healing and personal growth. Her genuine care and professional respect had helped me understand that my family's treatment had been abnormal rather than inevitable consequences of my own shortcomings. Our shared commitment to victim advocacy provided common purpose that strengthened both our professional collaboration and personal relationship. The work we did together created positive meaning from traumatic experiences while building a future based on mutual support and shared values. As evening approached, we prepared to leave the office together for dinner at our favorite restaurant, a routine that represented normalcy and stability that had been absent during my family's systematic criminal abuse. The simple pleasure of sharing meals and conversation with someone who genuinely cared about my well-being was still surprising after years of family manipulation. The business success and romantic relationship represented complete recovery from my family's criminal betrayal, transforming their intended destruction of my independence into professional expertise and personal happiness they had never wanted me to achieve. Justice had been served not just through criminal prosecution, but through the life I was building beyond their ability to control or destroy. At Christmas 1 year later, I hosted a celebration for identity theft survivors and their families, transforming my trauma into a mission of helping others while building the loving community I never had. December 23rd marked exactly 1 year since my family's criminal conspiracy had been exposed, and the transformation in my life felt almost impossible to believe as I prepared my beautiful new home for a Christmas celebration that would honor survival recovery and genuine community among people who understood the unique trauma of family betrayal. The 3-bedroom house I had purchased with federal restitution funds was decorated with warm lights and meaningful ornaments collected throughout the year, each representing a milestone in recovery or a friendship formed through our victim advocacy work. The home felt like a sanctuary where healing and hope could flourish among people who had survived similar betrayals. 43 guests were expected for the evening, including identity theft survivors, their supportive family members, legal advocates, federal investigators, and mental health professionals who had become part of our extended community of people committed to justice and healing. The gathering represented the family I had chosen rather than the one that had chosen to destroy me. Amy was in the kitchen preparing appetizers while coordinating final details for what had become an annual tradition that provided support and celebration for people whose families had committed financial crimes against them. Her presence in my life continued to demonstrate how genuine love supported growth rather than demanding submission. The Hendersons just called to say they're bringing their daughter who's visiting from college. She wants to meet the woman who helped her parents recover from her brother's identity theft, Amy reported, referring to clients whose successful recovery had become a model for other families dealing with similar betrayals. The Henderson case had involved a son who stole over $30,000 from his parents' retirement accounts to fund a gambling addiction, then attempted to manipulate family loyalty to avoid criminal prosecution. Our advocacy had helped them understand that accountability was actually an expression of love rather than abandonment. Dr. Sarah Mitchell will be arriving around 6 with some of her colleagues from the Trauma Recovery Clinic. They want to discuss expanding our collaboration to include specialized therapy for financial crime victims. I noted reviewing the evening's agenda that combined celebration with ongoing professional development. Dr. Mitchell's clinic had become an essential partner in our comprehensive recovery services, providing specialized counseling for victims whose family relationships had been permanently damaged by criminal betrayal. The emotional healing component was often more challenging than financial recovery. The dining room table was set with china and crystal I had been able to purchase because my credit rating had been completely restored through federal victim assistance programs. The beautiful dishes represented financial stability that my family had tried to steal, now transformed into tools for building community, with people who genuinely cared about each other's well-being. Agent Chen called to say she'll be a little late because she's finishing paperwork on another family identity theft case that's going to trial next month. She's bringing the victim to meet other survivors who can provide support during prosecution. Amy explained, referring to ongoing criminal cases that demonstrated how our advocacy work was expanding to help additional victims. Agent Patricia Chen had become a close friend whose professional expertise in financial crimes investigation complemented our victim advocacy services. Her presence at our celebration would provide reassurance to newer victims that law enforcement took family crimes seriously and pursued comprehensive prosecution. The living room featured photographs documenting recovery milestones, business achievements, and community events that had marked the past year of rebuilding my life. Each image told part of the story of transformation, from victim to advocate, from isolation to community, from desperation to hope. Derek and his new girlfriend should be here around 7. He's bringing documentation about another offshore banking scheme his finance contacts discovered, which could help us identify additional money laundering patterns. Amy noted, referring to Derek's ongoing cooperation with federal investigators and his personal recovery from Grace's manipulation. Derek's romantic relationship with a colleague from his corporate headquarters demonstrated his own growth in recognizing healthy partnership patterns. His new girlfriend was a financial analyst who appreciated his integrity and professional competence without attempting to exploit his position for personal advantage. The kitchen island displayed appetizers that represented diverse cultural traditions among our guest community, reflecting how identity theft affected people from all backgrounds, while creating bonds that transcended typical social boundaries. Shared trauma had created connections that evolved into genuine friendships based on mutual understanding. The Patel family is bringing their famous samosas, and Mrs. Rodriguez is contributing her holiday tamales. I love how our community celebrations reflect everyone's cultural heritage. Amy observed, noting how our gatherings had become truly multicultural events that honored diversity while addressing common experiences. Mrs. Rodriguez was an elderly widow whose adult son had stolen her Social Security benefits for 6 months before she discovered the theft. Her recovery had been particularly challenging because the crime had left her unable to afford prescription medications, but federal restitution had provided both financial recovery and access to healthcare assistance programs. The basement recreation room had been set up as a quiet space where guests dealing with ongoing legal proceedings could find privacy for difficult conversations or emotional processing. The trauma recovery work required safe spaces where people could acknowledge complex feelings about prosecuting family members. Judge Morrison's sentencing is scheduled for January 15th, and several victims want to attend to provide impact statements. Dr. Peterson's medical license revocation hearing is the following week. Amy reported reviewing ongoing legal proceedings that would provide closure for many victims. Judge Morrison's corruption charges had revealed systematic abuse of judicial authority that had affected dozens of cases beyond my family's criminal conspiracy. His removal from the bench and criminal prosecution were providing justice for many victims whose rights had been violated through his corrupt decisions. Grace's federal sentencing had occurred 2 months earlier, resulting in 12 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release with restrictions on financial activities and computer access. Her sophisticated criminal planning had resulted in enhanced penalties that reflected the systematic nature of her crimes. Grace's victim impact letter arrived yesterday requesting forgiveness and expressing remorse for her choices. She claims prison has helped her understand the damage she caused and wants to make amends after her release. Amy noted showing me correspondence that demonstrated Grace's ongoing attempts to manipulate narrative and avoid full responsibility. The letter contained typical manipulation tactics, including minimization of her crimes, emphasis on her own suffering, and attempts to pressure me into providing support that would help her parole applications. Her inability to accept complete responsibility for her criminal choices continued even from federal prison. I'm not interested in corresponding with Grace until she demonstrates genuine accountability through actions rather than words. Her letter reads like another attempt to manipulate emotions for personal benefit. I replied, recognizing manipulation patterns that had once been effective but no longer had power over my decisions. My parents had received 22-year federal sentences that would likely result in life imprisonment given their ages and health conditions. Their asset forfeiture had provided over $400,000 in victim restitution that was still being distributed to all identified victims. The final asset distribution should be completed by March, with most victims receiving compensation that exceeds their direct financial losses. Your parents' criminal enterprise generated enough seized assets to provide substantial punitive damages for everyone affected, Amy reported. The comprehensive restitution was providing victims with resources to rebuild their lives while ensuring that criminal proceeds would never benefit my parents or Grace. Their comfortable lifestyle had been completely eliminated, while their victims received financial assistance for recovery. The evening's program would include brief presentations from federal prosecutors, victim advocates, and mental health professionals about resources available for identity theft recovery. The educational component helped newer victims understand their rights while providing experienced survivors with opportunities to share effective recovery strategies. Assistant U.S. Attorney Jennifer Walsh wants to discuss the new federal legislation that would enhance penalties for family identity theft and provide additional resources for victim recovery. Our advocacy work has influenced policy development at the national level. Amy noted, referring to legislative achievements that had emerged from our community organizing efforts. The federal legislation would create specialized courts for family financial crimes and mandate enhanced penalties for criminals who exploited trust relationships for financial gain. Our advocacy work was contributing to systemic changes that would protect future victims while ensuring appropriate criminal consequences. As guests began arriving for the celebration, I reflected on how completely my life had been transformed through the process of seeking justice and building genuine community with people who shared similar experiences. The family that had tried to destroy me had ultimately provided motivation for creating a life they never wanted me to achieve. Thank you all for joining our second annual Identity Theft Survivors Christmas celebration. I addressed the gathering as everyone settled into the living room. This community represents the family we choose when the family we're born into chooses to harm us rather than support us. The audience included people whose children, parents, spouses, and siblings had committed financial crimes against them, demonstrating that family betrayal occurred across all relationship types and demographic categories. Shared experience had created bonds stronger than traditional family obligations. 1 year ago, I learned that my parents had been systematically stealing my identity, while my sister orchestrated emotional abuse designed to make me believe I deserved their treatment. Today, I own a successful business that helps other victims recover from similar crimes while building relationships based on genuine care rather than manipulation and exploitation. Amy squeezed my hand as I continued addressing the community that had become our extended family, providing support and understanding that my biological family had never offered during my entire life. The most important lesson I've learned is that family isn't defined by genetics or legal relationships, but by people who demonstrate genuine care through actions that support your growth and well-being. Real love builds you up rather than tearing you down for someone else's benefit. The audience included several couples who had met through our support services and formed relationships based on mutual healing and shared understanding of trauma recovery. Love that emerged from authentic connection created stronger bonds than relationships built on convenience or manipulation. Federal prosecution of my family's crimes provided justice, but building this community of survivors and advocates has provided healing that extends far beyond legal outcomes. We've created something beautiful from traumatic experiences while protecting other potential victims through advocacy and education. Dr. Mitchell nodded in agreement, recognizing how community building had become essential for long-term trauma recovery among victims whose family relationships had been permanently damaged by criminal betrayal. Chosen family relationships often provided better emotional support than biological family connections. As we celebrate this Christmas together, I want each of you to remember that surviving family betrayal doesn't diminish your worth or potential for happiness. The people who harmed us made choices that reflected their character, not ours. We deserve love, respect, and genuine family connections with people who celebrate our success, rather than sabotaging it. Amy stood to address the group as my business partner and romantic partner, representing how professional collaboration could evolve into personal relationship when based on shared values and mutual respect, rather than exploitation and control. When Chandra and I first met, we were focused on legal strategies for federal prosecution. But working together on victim advocacy has shown us how genuine partnership supports both individuals' growth while creating something more meaningful than either of us could achieve alone. Amy's words captured the essence of healthy relationship dynamics that prioritize both partners' well-being, equally contrasting sharply with the exploitation and manipulation that had characterized my family relationships. As the evening continued with shared meals, meaningful conversations, and emotional support among people who understood the unique challenges of family financial crimes, I realized that my recovery was complete, not just in legal or financial terms, but in the creation of authentic community that provided everything my biological family had failed to offer. The celebration represented triumph over criminal betrayal through the choice to seek justice, rather than accepting abuse to build community, rather than enduring isolation, and to transform trauma into purpose that helped other victims achieve similar recovery. My family's intended destruction had become the foundation for a life they never wanted me to live. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and personal justice when someone you trusted betrayed that trust in ways that threatened your future? Your experiences and insights could help other people facing similar difficult decisions about holding family members accountable for harmful behavior. Please like this video if you believe that genuine love supports accountability rather than enabling harmful behavior. Subscribe to our channel for more stories about survivors who found strength through seeking justice and building authentic communities. Share this story with anyone who might be struggling with family betrayal, and remember that you deserve relationships that celebrate your growth rather than sabotaging your success. Thank you for joining me on this journey from victimization to advocacy, from family betrayal to chosen family, from financial destruction to professional purpose. May you find the courage to protect yourself from those who would harm you and the wisdom to build connections with those who genuinely support your well-being and growth.